就讲就好了，就讲就好了。
对。
我这个差不多了。
你这个可以啊，你看再换，你看看他们还有。
我把我共享结束一下。
OK。
哎，不用共享。停止共享，这里有。好。刘老师、何老师，那我就先退出一下，然后提前10分钟加入，怎么样
？OK。
好的，好，那我们待会儿见。
好吧，他新刚走，现在还别。
要么我现在让那个谁，让刘主任过来那个试一下。
好，可以啊，当然可以。
好。
哎，王前那怎么回事？我们都能进来。
王前是不是又是链接有问题啊
？B 站开，B 站开了没有？
他上次好像进来的，对，我看刘主任已经进来了啊，刘主任好。
我刚进来。
刘主任你好。
对，
你好，是今天开会吗？
对。
8点钟。
哦，那现在就是这个状态对吗？
您现在就是比如说共享一下那个 PPT 试试看。对的，我已经看到了。
我共享 PPT 试试看啊。
对。
看得到吗？
有了。然后您直接播放一下呢？
播放一下。可以吧？
可以了，我截个屏过来，我截个屏都要发给您，可以，应该可以的，没什么问题。
那就没问题是吧？
对，应该是这样的。
你截个屏。
我截个屏发过来。
哎，那是谁在放 PPT？ 世军是你吗？
不是，刘主任在放 PPT。
我在放。
刘主任测试一下。
我测试一下。
我发过来了，应该是很稳定的，我看到了。
今天几点钟啊？应该是。
8点钟是那个沈老师和刘老师先简单介绍一下，然后接下来就是你应该是第一个吧？
是刘主任是第一个，
就是上海时间8点钟吗？
对的，上海时间北京时间8点钟。
好的。
刘主任后面那个背景很漂亮啊，看着有海啊。
这是虚拟的，这可以，你可以自己选。
是，很不错，看着很好。
我准备换一个那个，再换一个背景。
觉得上次那个才是叫霸气吧？
上次
那个大会堂才叫霸气。
哦，那个大会的背景是吧？
对呀。
我还准备想弄个美国黄石公园这个世界末日的照片给大家看。
哎呦，那不好，吓坏了。
对，那个是不大好，可以搞一个美国的比较好一点的风景。
这个也。
哎，我这是不是现在还在共享着呢？屏幕啊？
对，您的那个
从哪个地方开始选择结束共享的？
它有个结束共享的，有个结束共享的。
看到了。好了，结束了。
现在就是那个对的。
然后我来看看，选择换一个虚拟背景啊。这个选择个我在美国亲自拍的啊，这个照片，这个好吧？
这个已经看到了，换过来了。
这个都是这个。
不，刚才第二张不行，第二张太暗了，
要亮一点，对吧？
对，背景稍微亮一点的。
这个也不大好，是吧？这黄石。
这个也太暗了。
其实第一个还可以，这个也。
第一个和第三个那个草地那个也还可以，比较亮。
就是或者是就是金门大桥。
这个金门大桥也可以。
金门大桥也可以。
这个
我就说刚才这张。
这个好哈，还动态的。
这个好。
就这个吧。
这个好。
就这个是那个他电脑啊，他自己默认的
自带的那个。
对，挺好的，这个挺好。
好，那我基本上就这样就 OK 了。然后这个要不要穿军装呢？这个要不要穿那个西装呢？
这个刘老师，您看要穿吗？
就是看大多数人，我不知道这个，因为这是国际会嘛，还要穿上吧？要不？
可以，挺好。
会不会太热了？
挺好，这个挺好。
什么？
会不会太热了？
我再穿个西装看看啊。穿上西装就正式了。
很好，非常好。
这个很正式。这个西装好像弄了以后，他那个整个人割的比原来好像刚才要清晰一点，就是那个人呢，
就是人就显得精神一点，是吧？
不是，就是一开始穿那个的话，有的时候可能跟背景区分不开。穿衬衣，因为它后面也是白色，那个现在
后面因为背景太亮哈。
对，就现在区分的比较明显。
好的。那我就这个了。
到时候刘主任，您可以到时候7点55左右，55样子接进来就差不多了。
好的。
您可以先再休息一下，也可以。
好，谢谢，一会儿见啊。
好，有什么问题直接找我就可以了。
好嘞 ，OK， 好。
我现在一直在线上。
拜拜。
好。后面几个讲者要不要也稍微测试一下的？
今天是咱们看看那个日程啊，同学们。
我重启一下机器啊。
你们谁吹谢定刚？问问定刚在不在，可不可以上线了？
那在这个群里问。
石辉，你在测那个 YouTube 吗？
我还没打开呢 YouTube 吧，但我马上测一下。 可以，但现在就没有图像，现在暂时。
那好，这个问题不大，待会会有的。现在王强进来没有？还没有进来，好像。定刚进来了，定刚。
沈老师来进来了。
定刚，你要下一下 slice 试一试吗？
好啊。
挺好。
沈老师，你说几句话，听一听。
辉光好。
沈老师好，因为上次好像刚开始说您的这个声音可能，对，有点，那后来往前可能调那个
我的
系统。
声音没问题，那是别的里面的问题。这个
好吧
Zoom 里面都是没问题的，你录下来的东西都没有问题的。
现在挺清晰的，挺好的。
我这你原来这个 Zoom 里面录下来的这个录像里面声音都很清晰的，是这个后面转播的时候的一些问题吧，跟这个我这边说的没有问题的。我说的时候，它必须的声音还响了。
OK， 挺好，OK， 没问题。
他们这个 YouTube 里面能够看到这个 slice 吗？
可以，YouTube 我看不了，石辉你看看 YouTube。
哔哩哔哩
可以啊，这边这个 YouTube 是没问题啊。
你能看到这个 slice 对吧？
很好，声音很好。
slice
也很好。
看到什么呢？
可以。
看到什么？可以。
就一个封面就能够看到。
看见了，我截图了，截图。
王钱还没进来呢，
他那个账号又有问题了。
不知道啊，
我重启一下，居然还帮我更新了一下 Room。
他最近经常更新呢，经常更新。
我重启一下，结果发现他叫我更新 Room 呢。
咱们算是在这个 panelist 进来还算好一点，要在外面你晚一点根本进不来。早上我本来又想听一个报告，又被挤出去了，又不行了。他朋友圈不是传那个什么那个 Harry。Harry 的报告。
开始刚才那个韩国的就业教授刚才进来的又出去了，所以我们开始这个用英文了吧？好吧
？OK。
So Timmy,
yes.
we have 7 talks. So firstly, I will introduce this webinar.
Right.
Maybe it will take. Firstly, I will say firstly you will introduce the arrangement for the webinar. For example, I will give like more like a summary for the webinar.
Yeah.
And then after I finish, maybe it's almost 10 minutes later. Then first talk will be Dr. Liu, Siyue Liu. So we needed to basically introduce one by one, or I would say you just introduce 3 or 4 of them. For example, first 4 of them for you. And then last 3 for me.
Okay.
Is that okay for you?
Probably you can introduce the first. I don't know. Or we can. You first you can introduce the. We have 7. You can first introduce the 4, and then I introduce the last 3, or.
You want me to introduce the first 3?
Yeah, probably you can introduce Dr. Professor Si Yuanliu.
Okay, as you know, I don't have their abstract or their CVs in my computer. Do you have?
I don't have. Yeah, maybe I think what we can do is we briefly introduce the agenda, and then you can go through the summary slides. Then we can get started. We probably do not spend too much time on the introduction speakers because most of them
because I'll introduce one by one. For example, for their name and the title, and they have individual slides, right? So that I introduce one by one for all the 7 today. And then basically, they will talk one by one. So before they talk, maybe, the first one I can introduce because I was summarizer for the whole webinar. And after I finish it, then I introduce the first one.
Okay. Yeah.
You want me to introduce first, I would say, for example, I introduce the first one, you introduce the second one, then I introduce the third one.
Yeah, good.
Then, this will be better maybe.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So that means, I will introduce Dr. Si Yuanliu, you will introduce Ziyan.
Yes, correct.
And then I will introduce Dr. Bai, and you will introduce Dr. Ye from Korea.
Yeah.
And then, I will introduce Greenspan. Greenspan, we introduce Yang.
Yeah.
And then I introduce Xingang Wang. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe this is better. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Because we already have the names, the title, talks, and definition, and then probably just do a very brief introduction there.
Just very briefly, so I would say, for me, it's like relatively easy to introduce them. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then maybe Guoyan can introduce a couple of other speakers tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is Guoyan here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Then, I think you should introduce some of, basically, let's say, okay, 1, 2, 3, like one, 3 of us, then 4, 5, 6, for 3 of us. So let's do in this way. I do first one, Tianming second one, third one, Guoye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4, me. Number 5, Tianming. Number 6 and number 7, Guoye.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. So I do last 2, right? Okay, last 2.
Yeah.
You do last 2 and you do third one. Third one.
Okay.
And the last
third
2.
and last 2. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I will do basically, the first one, like number 1 and number 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Sun, I have sent you the CV of Dr. Liu.
Okay.
You can check it.
Okay. Thank you.
So after each presentation, do we have the question and answer time?
I think we will not have time for questions, but we can ask audience to send their questions to the list, and then of course when they send the questions, they need to mention who are the speakers. Then we can ask all the speakers to answer their questions.
Right.
Okay.
And after the talk, the speaker can answer the questions over the Q&A section individually or broadcasting. So not necessarily by talking about the question, but just typing the answers.
Yeah, just typing the answers.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, in this way, the interference will be minimized.
Yeah. If we still have time, or people want to ask questions. Then we can let them ask questions in the end of all the talks.
Yeah.
Right. I see Guo Tai is in. Hello. Good morning. Good evening.
Guo Tai will be tomorrow, right?
Yeah, Guo Tai will be tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Tammy, I think in the beginning you can, say something, and then also say, for each talk, if an audience has questions, just type the questions, and the speaker will answer the questions online.
Okay. Yeah.
And also mention if we have time, and the audience also like to spend more time, then in the end of our talks, we can let the speaker answer the questions.
Yeah, sure. I do not see Wang Qian here.
He's still not here.
He's not here.
He's here. Maybe he used the mix podcast, I think.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Is the Bilibili website already on?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Sure.
So how many people in Zoom right now?
8, because this is still in the called practice mode. I have not allowed all the attendees in yet. I will probably do that 5 minutes before the session starts.
Okay.
Yeah, because we are doing the practice, doing all kind of testing and discussions, so it's not broadcasting yet.
I think so we mentioned that you can see the video in YouTube, right?
Yes.
So just the video, no audio.
Or with audio. Both.
So that means, all we are chatting, people can hear.
Yeah, but I don't think many people are looking at the YouTube right now. Let me look at the how many people are. Yeah.
How many people in YouTube right now?
5.
Only 5.
Yeah, so
how many in Bilibili? Hui Guang?
Yes.
How many people watching Bilibili right now?
Okay, I will check.
for the Zoom meeting, we have 962 registrations. So pretty much very close to 1,000 on Zoom.
Okay.
Now Dr. Julia is in. Hello? Dr. Ye.
Oh, yeah, hello.
Hey.
Hey, Dr. Ye, this is Ding Gang.
Hi, Lingang. How are you?
Oh, good, good.
You
Do you
know
want
it's-
to try your screen?
Oh, yeah, let me try screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will stop sharing, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Maybe then we
Okay.
can switch back.
Okay. And also, Dr. Liu, Siyue Liu, maybe, you know.
Yeah, Dr. Liu already tried that.
So,
Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah,
can you
yeah,
see my
well,
screen?
Yeah,
yes,
cool.
very good.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you. Mhm.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing then.
Okay.
So I will share screen, right, Timmy?
Yes, yes.
Then people can see this. Okay.
Yes, I just checked Bilibili. Right now there is nearly 300 people.
Oh, okay. Can you send the Bilibili website in our WeChat group?
You need the Bilibili the link?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Then I think I can test, you know, in my iPhone. Yeah. So we already get. So
Yeah.
good.
Xingang is in. Xingang, do you want to try your screen?
I've already
I've already
the
tried,
link.
but
Oh, okay, good.
I can try that again.
Okay, good, good.
Already tried, right? Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
The link?
Yes.
Currently, I cannot try it because so someone is sharing, so I cannot
Oh,
share.
I can stop
But
that.
do not change it. Yeah, okay.
No, Xingang, you can try
Yeah.
right now. I just
Okay.
I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I've tried about
Cool.
half an hour ago. Yeah, it is okay. So
That's
can you
good.
see the slash?
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah, we can see that now.
So, okay, good. So it may take a few seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So you can stop sharing. That should be okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, just stopped.
Good.
Yeah, Ding I will let all the attendees in. There may be up to 1,000 waiting on the Zoom, so it may take a few minutes for them to get in.
Yeah, you just you know, let everyone in. I think,
I will let everybody in. Okay.
Yeah, just 6 minutes right now. You know.
Okay.
So should I share a screen?
Yes, sure, please.
Okay.
I see Ziyan is in. Maybe Ding will have Ziyan to test his screen. He has not done it
Okay.
yet.
Yeah, can you try? I just stop sharing.
Ziyan, can you try your screen sharing?
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
right.
All right.
Oh.
Okay. I'll stop then.
Yeah, I see Hyatt is in. Hyatt, can you share your screen? Try it out. Hello, can you hear us?
Because you know, we can see Dr. Liu.
Yeah, Siri Liu.
Oh, Yang, can you try your screen? Can you share your screen? Maybe Yang will be Yang.
Oh yeah.
Yang is today.
Yang, can you try your screen?
Okay, let me try that. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Wait a second. Can you see that?
Ah, cool.
Yes,
Great.
good.
Okay.
Great. I see Dr. Hayed Greenspan is in. Hayed, can you try your screen?
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you
Yes.
try your screen?
Hey. Yeah, let me just get my my PowerPoint up somewhere.
Yeah, works.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Nice.
Good. We are
Okay.
still, yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thanks. We are still waiting for Harrison Bai on the speaker list. Maybe he can join us later. I don't know.
Number four, right?
Yeah, number 4. Hey, can you exit the screen sharing?
Sure, sorry. Here we
Yeah,
go.
no problem. Thanks. Dingan, you can turn on.
Okay.
Hi, Jim. Good morning.
Yes. Hi, guys.
Hi, Jim. This is Dingang.
How are you, Dingang? Good to see you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, probably let's get started. It's already 8 o'clock.
I say already 8 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just start.
Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So this is international webinar. We have a pretty busy schedule today. We have 7 speakers and talks, and our agenda is first, Dingang will do a brief introduction of all the talks. by the summary slides, and then we do the talk one by one, and the attendees can raise the questions on the Zoom webinar interface, and the speakers can handle those questions maybe by typing the answers to minimize the interference of the talk. If you have additional questions, probably we can discuss that offline or send emails to the speakers. So, Dinggang, it's yours.
Okay. So the title for this MICA webinar is Imaging AI-based Management of COVID-19. And this is co-organized by Tianming Guoye with me. And we also have the 5 technical support committee, Jun, Hui Guang, Qian, Dong, and Si Hui for all the work. And this is basically MICA support organized by MICA Society and also mixed in China, and financially supported by Shanghai United Imaging Intelligence. Actually, before this 4-day webinar, we already have preparation for the this webinar on May 9. We have 2 one-week talk, 2 1-hour talk. The first one, which is my one, and I talk about integrating AI in imaging, quantification, and identification of COVID-19. And if you are interested, this is a video in YouTube and Bilibili. Also, Sui Wang talk about deep learning on images and graph, and he also mentioned the apply of this technique to COVID-19. So basically today, we are going to have 7 20 minutes talk, and tomorrow we are going to have 8 20 minutes talk. And in the next couple slides, I will show how the full stack imaging AI can be applied to the COVID-19 applications. So basically, AI can be used for countless imaging to protect the technician from infections by COVID-19. And although after we acquire the images, AI can be developed for quantifying infections. All the infections quantified can be used for assess the severity. I will talk one by one very briefly in the next couple slides. For the countless imaging, actually, these are like a traditional or conventional imaging workflow. Technician had to be with the patient, and then technician also need to adjust relatively positions between patient and X-ray tube. In this way, it's very possible to have close contact between technician and the patient. In this way, technician may be exposed to virus. So there's one technique called countless imaging. Basically, you have 2 rooms, one room for patient, another room for technicians. And in the top of the room, there's a camera we call the air camera. Air camera not taking the images for the patient. And also basically the air camera can match each body parts, means it can recognize where is the chest area, then you can scan. Next, just show you very brief video, for example, when the AI identifies the patient, then can control the scanner to move. And then, image will be scanned exactly on the area you are interested. For example, chest area for the COVID-19 case. So after acquired images, actually patient is still on table. The technique like AI is developed to automatically quantify the infections. So there's a lot of methods have been developed. Actually, we have invited review paper for IEEE reviews in biomedical engineering, and we summarize all the papers by May 31st. For example, 67% of papers use UNet for segmentation, 22% of papers use UNet plus, 11% of papers use VBNet. All this method is used to segment long, also segment on long lobe, and also more papers used to segment the lesions or infections. So here is a basic, method people use, for example, try to use deep learning algorithm to segment not only infection, here is the infection area in the lung, although they want to segment the left lung, right lung, and 2 lobes in the left lung and 3 lobes in the right lung, total 5 lobes. And also in the whole lungs, try to segment 18 segments. Actually, there's a lot of innovations that can be developed for these applications, particularly if you want to segment the infection should be within the lung. And also if we want to segment lobe, the neighboring lobe, like middle lobe and the bottom lobe, they should be constrained. In the conventional algorithm, we just develop, for example, dice ratio to measure segmentation for each lobe separately. In this way, bottom lobe can be segmented on the top of the middle lobe if you don't have any constraints between them. So there's a lot of innovative loss function can be identified. Basically, you can identify the closing, information between the neighboring lobes. And also when you develop deep learning algorithm, particularly in the initial stage, you don't have a lot of manual labeled infection and also this long images. So in this way, a technique called like a human in loop means AI algorithm and human build a loop. Then they can help each other in this way. It can iteratively increase the size of the training data, basically apply the previous trained network to the new data set, and then radiologists pick some of them for manual collection. And those collect samples are included into the training data and try to help all the segmentations. So this kind of technique can be used to segment infection, and also can use it to segment left lung, right lung, then you know infection in each lung. And also, as I mentioned, you can segment 5 lobes, infection in each lobe. Also, you can segment 18 segments, then the infections in each segments. Also, more importantly, we can do the component analysis for infections. As you can see in this figure, we have 4 different parts for the histogram of the infections in each segment or each lobe or left, right lung. So the origin area actually corresponding to the GGO. This is one of the important imaging biomarker for COVID-19. And also technique can be used to do longitudinal comparison. If you segment infection from current image, and also you segment infection from previous images. Basically in China, for example, for the patient in the hospital, they scan the subject every 3 to 5 days. Then you can compare the infection, for example. Here is a component analysis. You have the histogram for the infection in previous time point, and you have the current time point infection distribution. So this distribution moved to this left side means the healthy side for the lung, and that means the lung is recovering for the subject. And also, after you acquire images, then one important thing is you want to do identification, severity assessment, and prediction. For example, after you acquire the images and the patient is still in the CT and particularly on the PT table, then before sending this CT to the radiologist, the algorithm can do this kind of questions. For example, where the current subject has COVID-19 or CAP. CAP stands for community acquired pneumonia. And of course, this is very important task. You can have one algorithm to do that. if this subject has COVID-19, then next questions you want to ask, actually physician will also ask whether this patient is mild or severe. You can develop a second technique to answer these questions. Then if this subject has mild cognitive, next question is where this subject will progress to severe or not progress to severe. With all this kind of AI-based diagnosis, you can better manage patients. Means how can you treat them differently or put them in the different hospital for different special treatment. So actually a lot of technique developed in these directions, as also shown in our review paper. 60% of papers actually use the CT and 40% of papers use the X-ray. And 50% of paper answer questions where the current patient has COVID-19 or no COVID-19. And 43% of papers asking the questions whether this subject has COVID-19 or other pneumonia. So 7% of paper answer very difficult questions to try to assess the severity for the COVID-19 subject. And although in terms of method, 86% of papers use deep learning, 14% of papers use a traditional machine learning algorithm. And although for the performance of all these methods, actually 43% of papers got a percentage of accuracy, like 80 to 90% of accuracy. Over 57% of papers got over 90% of accuracy. So this is all the papers actually published by March 31st this year. So today, actually, we are going to have 7 talks. I will talk them very briefly, and let the speakers spend more time talking about their method. So first talk will be presented by Dr. Siyue Liu. He is elected chairman of Chinese Society of Radiology in China. So he's going to talk about the role of AI in COVID-19 clinical decision-making. So that means, for example, AI can reduce the burden and improve efficiency. And also, as I mentioned, the AI can be used to do the diagnosis and also longitudinal follow-up studies. So the second paper will be presented by Zhiye Wu from United Imaging Intelligence in US, Boston, US. So he is going to talk about countless patient positioning for the CT imaging. Third paper from Dr. Bai, actually from the Brown University. He's going to talk about if a physician is using AI or without using AI, whether using AI can improve the diagnosis. For example, can identify other pneumonia for the from the COVID-19. So number 4 paper actually will be presented by Dr. Ye from Korea. So he will talk about the deep learning algorithm, try to do the identifications using X-ray images, and he will talking about mainly for the small data set, like how to develop algorithm to solve the small data issues. And the number 4 papers will be presented by Hayata Greenspan from Israel. So she basically developed a method to segment all the infections from the image, and then using a quantitative way, like relative score. For example, you have more infection as a 1, less infection, for example, 0.51, or no infection 0. So this is a method he is going to talk about. And then Dr. Yang from New York. So he will talk about method he developed in Nature Medicine. This is a paper, this paper accepted by the Nature Medicine. He's talking about not only using CT images and also using non-image information. So for example, for clinical score, blood testing, and all other information. Then where the integrate this information can improve the diagnosis of the COVID-19. So the final papers for today, actually Dr. Xinggang Wang from Huazhong University of Science and Technology, actually from Wuhan. So he worked basically, he started, work very early in January, early February for this work. So his method basically say, okay, if you have the CT images, I want to do the diagnosis. But in the meanwhile, I also want to segment, lungs using unsupervised imitation. Then all the features used for diagnosis can be getting from the segmented lung. Also, in the meanwhile, this algorithm can automatically estimate lesions in the CT. So this is like a lesion localization. So these are all the papers, and also I very briefly mentioned, for example, if people are interested working on the COVID-19, and we do have the special issues you can concern. This is a special issues in the IEEE medical imaging. I'm a leading guest editor for this, and maybe this is one of the first special issue on COVID-19 in the engineering journal, and also working with Tianming and also other colleagues. And we have the second special issue in the medical image analysis. And the third one actually in the pattern recognition. This will be announced very soon. So then today, like I mentioned, we have 7 talks, and the first talk will be presented by Dr. Siyue Liu. As I mentioned, he is elected chairman of China Society of Radiology, and he is also director for radiology department in Changchun Hospital in Shanghai. So Dr. Liu, I will stop sharing, and then you can just share your screen and start to present your work. Dr. Liu. Dr. Siyue Liu.
Okay. Thank you very much for your introduction, Professor Ding Gang. And I'm very happy here, and thanks a lot for the invitation from Ding Gang and Tianming to join this this webinar and this meeting to communicate with the professors globally. Today, I want to talk about the role of artificial intelligence in the COVID-19 clinical decision. I want to share the experience from China. In the past months, we have done a lot of practice in the clinical, in the hospital. So I want to share some experience. Currently, the new coronavirus is very speedily globally and very difficult to control. Up to today, 19th o'clock, and the total confirmed case have over 4.37 million, and the death cases almost 300,000. Maybe the role of the imaging is different from the different countries, especially between US and China. Maybe in America, the X-ray being more used than in China at the beginning. Maybe the CT plays a very important role. According to the guideline version 7 from the Chinese National Health Bureau, medical imaging plays an irreplaceable role throughout the whole process of diagnosis and treatment, including the detection of lesions, confirmations of suspected patients, clinical classification, and the most important role is the differential diagnosis. And even while to judge the patient if it's can be out from the hospital, the discharge criteria must be made by the medical imaging examinations. Just like Ding Gang mentioned, the most commonly used scanner is CT, followed by DR and ultrasound. MR and PET are rarely used. Expert consensus and guidelines from the different academic institutions have been made and published, and this helped the clinical and have very useful in the beginning of the disease control. Is especially the technical, how to use these different modalities and how to make the diagnosis and how to judge the therapy effect. During the beginning of the COVID-19 in Wuhan, Hubei province, this year, the beginning of this year, because the shortage of virus nucleic acid testing case, and also the sensitivity is not so high, so the CT played a very important role for early detection. Because in the central hospital, most suspected patient must be examined. So in a big hospital, maybe one day, over 800 chest CT examinations must be done. So, and they need the timely report. So if the radiologist want to give the in-time report, is very difficult. So this is expected by the radiologist that if AI can do something, if it can speed up and improve the diagnosis and treatment, maybe it's welcome clinically. In this situation, I think in the radiologist view, maybe the AR should have 5 aspects roles. The first is to optimize the workflow. The second is the early detection and the early diagnosis. Third is the quantification of the lesions. The fourth is the dynamic follow-up, and the last one for the constructing maybe the reports should be the final demands from the radiologist. At the beginning of this year, response to the strongly demand from central epidemic area, a few head AR company, especially startup company, regardless of the risk of infection, during the traditional Chinese Spring Festival, the research team from different company, Live Family, work together with doctors in Wuhan and focus on the COVID-19 products, AR products. And after the hard work, they have the primary pneumonia AR models and used clinically. It have achieved good using effect and have got the positive feedback from the radiologists. At present, there are 25 enterprises in China, including the traditional medical equipment vendor, claimed they have pneumonia AR products. And some research from the institutes and hospitals also carry out their research and developed the pneumonia AR products. The AR's role, the first role is to optimize the workflow and facilitate infection control. In the outbreak of the Hubei province, many startups come to the central epidemic area to develop the AR models, and some scanner vendors donate scanners, provide CT scanners, including the domestic the enterprises for the Dingang's company is United Imaging, Newsoft, and other famous international medical imaging vendors, for example, Siemens, GE, Philips, Canon, etc. And these scanners, they have been installed in Wuhan, Viking Mountain, Square Carbon Hospital, and the General Hospital, for the fever outpatient service, which this installed scanner greatly improves the work efficiency, makes the infection control easier, and protects the medical staff safely, maybe in the different part. Just like Dingang mentioned, that because the most scanner have the intelligent function, we can call it intelligent scanner, can do the countless scan examinations. For example, the identification of the patient, and the remote monitoring, and the intelligent localization of the examination position. Also, adjust the parameters. This is help to keep the staff from the infections in this area is very helpful. Second, the AR can energize radiologists to work more efficiently because the AR can detect lesions and give early warning, saving waiting time. AR can be, and we can see from this figure that the AR reports can be 3 hours earlier than the manual report, and 120 hours earlier than the results of PCR's examinations. Obviously, the AR can reduce the burden of doctors. And I think from these results, we can imagine if the accuracy of a robust could keep in a high level, once it is put into clinical use, it can save a lot of time. So the efficient we can look for. This is the data from the Shanghai Public Health Center. I think Dingang has cooperated with them. It shows that the AR model can reduce the time of traditional manual quantitative evaluation from 2 to 3 hours, and can save to 2 to 3 seconds. This is marvelous, I think. Moreover, the sensitivity and the specificity of the detection and diagnosis is 97 and 99 is very high. The second role of AR is the early detection and the diagnosis. One function is to remind the physicians if the COVID-19 infection existed on the workstation. So the second, it can help to open the patient's record in one touch. And the third is can highlight the suspected lesions, can remind the physician or the radiologist to manage the patient. AR can automatically identify and map the infected area, including localize the lobe and segment position, make differentiation between inflammatory lesions from nodules or other lesions, and color marking and marks a different density. And also it can provide 3D VR interactive view. Some companies' products can also provide case comparisons and make similar judgments. For example, the density similar is 90%, and the morphology similarity is 80%. From the similar judgments, it can make the diagnosis more reliable. And it also can extract descriptive information to give out the output structure reports, which is the final, I think, the final request from the doctors, because it is the clinical scenarios. It can give the structure reports. And a lot of papers have been published using the AR to make diagnosis and the therapy effect evaluations. This is published in March this year, and this paper told us the differentiated diagnosis between the COVID-19 from the community-acquired pneumonia, and the sensitivity and specificity is all above 90%. So that showed this the differential diagnosis it can work use the AR to make this differential diagnosis. And the third is maybe also the most important role of the AR is the quantification and grading or typing the disease. So the acquisition of the quantitative informations is the advantages of the AR. At present, the quantitative informations can provide a lot of functions. First, it can locate it can detect the abnormal, can detect the lesions. Second, it can give the quantitative analysis and how the distributions. And the third, and it can give the lob and segmentations, how many lesions and how many tissues involved being detected, and finally can give the analysis of the lesion density. Is the GGOs or consolidations can by the density curve it can tell us. This is the ordinary patient. Is a 30 years old female, and the AR detected is very slight, light ground glass nodules in the right lower lobe, and because the lesion is very small, so the involved tissues only less than 0.1% of the lobe, and the density curve also told us that the most of the lesions is the ground glass or ground glass opacity, mainly the Hounsfield is between the -600 and to the -900s. Because the pneumonia lesion varies in a large scale, it could appear as ground glass opacity, consolidations, irregular lesions, etc. So how to codify the lesions of different properties is very difficult for the AR, and especially if you want to classify the different type. So especially when the GGO, the boundary is not so clear, maybe it's very difficult to do the segmentation for the AR. And the distinct between the mild, moderate, and critical pneumonia is based on the proportion of the lesions of different nature in different pulmonary lobes. So some enterprises have done this very well. There are these explorations, how to separate and how to grade the disease, the lesions. This is the results from one startup companies. We can see you can assess the pneumonia areas accurately. The total volume and the density of pneumonia lesion, volume and the density of lung lobe lesions, volume and the density of pneumonia lesion in each lung lobe, ratio of pneumonia lesions to total lung volume, density analysis of inflammatory lesions, and also can give the component numbers with chest. So it can provide a lot of informations. The first role of AI is the follow-up and give the dynamic observation. Traditionally, we complete this work by the radiologist, by the naked eye to give the read of the films. We can see the first time examination, most of the nodules are ground glass opacity. The second time, 1 week later, and more lesions appeared, and most of them are consolidations nodules. And after 10 days later, the third examinations, we can see the decrease of the nodules, and it's changed as smaller than before. And the fourth and the fifth examination, the nodules decreased continually, and also the density also decreased back to the ground glass opacity. So the ground glass opacity not always means the acute infections of the pulmonary. Maybe it's the absorb stage. So we should continually and see the changes of the images. But for this, because it's only read by the doctors, so it's not so accurate. But the AR has the advantages to do this. The AR can compare the images between 2 times, and also can give the data, the results, and also it can give the mark and the sketching of the lesions, and lets us to find the lesions, and for the primary doctors to more visual and easier to see the lesions, to catch the lesions. This is a 30 years old patient with cough and a fever more than 5 days. Directly by Earth, we can see the second time image showed that the lesion is very light. If we not helped by the AR, maybe can be missed by the naked eyes. And we also can, from the AR, we can see that the lower lobe of the lesion of the shadow volume decreased from 118 to the 80 centimeter squares, indicating the absorb of the lesion. This is another 31 years female patient with fever 1 day and cough more than 10 days. This is the full course of the disease. Also, there is 5 times examinations, and the last 4 times examination, the AR can detect it. The first one is the early stage, and the disease is very light GGO. Maybe if the AR not help, maybe most of us will miss it. And the second time, the third time, because the consolidation and very obvious GGO, so it's detected and also gives the quantitatively analysis results. And the fourth is the absorb stage. So the lesions is also very light. Maybe if without the square of the AR mark, maybe we can't find it. This is the Western period, the lesion absorbed, so AR detect nothing. The most advantage of the AR may be the digital presentation, which can basically provide the lesion ratio and the density of different pulmonary lobes and compare the changes before and after And then we can get the information that the patient getting better or getting worse. And this patient, we can see the total amount of the disease is increased to 274%. But some lobes decreased, some 3 lobes decreased, 2 lobes increased, and we can see directly the different change of the different lobe. We can also see the difference more visually and by the different chart. From this bar chart, we can see this is the second time examination. This is the first time. By comparison, we can this patient increased the lesions increased a lot more than the first one. And we can also, by the density curve, this is the first time examinations is 1 peak curve. This means the first time the disease, the disorder pulse of the tissue is mainly GGOs. But the second time is a double peak curve. That means one pulse of the lesions is a GGO, another pulse of the lesions is consolidations, because the density is around 0 Hounsfield. And we can also have the overview of the whole disease course, and we can see in the changes according to the different time. At the beginning, it's the most obviously disease period, and then after treatments, it's decreased, not disappeared, but it's increasing, and in a slight slope. So maybe that means that this patient not recover completely. This is a real working station, the interface of the AR tools. From when startups, we can see the red numbers is the probability of the infections of COVID-19. Below that is the distribution of lesions in different lobes. We can see the right lung, the left lung. Right lung is 3.89%. The left lung is 5.49%, and the center is the images, and we can see the outlines of the lesions. And the right is the constructing reports. Here is the descriptive informations. Here is the conclusions of these examinations. So this is the interface, the clinical used interface of the workstation. So in conclusion, in a world, the current pneumonia, the pneumonia AR products maybe have met the 5 functional requirements of infection control, disease discovery, disease diagnosis, and quantification and follow-up observations to varying degrees. At present, the main application scenarios are in the imaging department, and a few are developed in clinical departments, fever clinics, and some for the MDT consultations, and some are shared and used through the cloud platform based on the internet. At present, the common problems of this kind of products are follows. I think most of them are extended from the former multitask models, and they changed urgently to fulfill this epidemic. And some products maybe just focus on the concepts of COVID-19 and not strictly in annotation of data and the training quality. So insufficient training and uneven labeling quality lead to the weak generalization of clinical practice. Most of the models are trained mainly depend on the imaging data and not include the clinical informations and the laboratory informations. The most important things, I think, the function of the differential diagnosis needs to be improved, especially in the post-epidemic and in the non-epidemic area period, if it can be used for all the pneumonias, if it can be different etiologies. The NMPA, the National Medical Products Administration of China, has released the comprehensive guide for the pneumonia AR products in February to conduct the company to apply CFDA certificate. There are 5 sides. The first is the basic requirements, including the security of the software and the core algorithms, cybersecurity, provide cloud computer service. The second is the risk control, mainly the false positive and false negative, the rate, if it's in the safe line, if the false risk can be controlled in the clinic risk. The third is the software functions, especially it should have the quantitative analysis and report output. That means the constructing report output. Then fourth is about the data. This emphasizes the quality of the data source and the quantity and annotations. Finally, the clinical verifications. If they have the clinical trial evaluation have been done, and how the method been the quantitative work, how to judge how the clinical test. So this is also very important. Also the software functions, the necessary functions, if can the software provide. So in the future, what's the developing the directions? I think first we should have a clear research objectives. That means if our products or the models fulfill the totally demands of the clinical scenarios or just to solve one problems, we should very clear. The second is I think before to make models, we should to do the highly controlled data and to do the annotations and high quality the data sets. So the pneumonia science should be confirmed and the data labeling methods should be made by the experts consensus. Finally, the algorithms, I think, is the most important, should be have a breakthrough, because every revolution of if the change of life or the work should depend on the revolution of the techniques. So this times, I think the AR products also the key points is should depend on the algorithms. Engels said that there is no great historical disaster that is not compensated by the progress of history. I hope this human disaster, this epidemic will end soon. And I hope that after this disaster, we can get the technological progress and have compensations, at least in the prevention and control of the infectious disease, the level of the diagnosis and the treatment of the pneumonia, especially in the development and the applications of pneumonia artificial intelligence can be improved a lot more. That's my speak. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Liu, for a great talk. So can you stop sharing right now? Timmy, it's your turn to chair the next talk.
Yeah, sure. So thanks to Professor Su and Liu's great talk, very impressive. So our next talk will be contact list patient positioning for CT imaging, to be presented by Ziyan Wu. He's a principal expert scientist of vision and robotics in United Imaging Intelligence in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So Ziyan, it's yours. I do not hear your voice, Ziyan.
Ziyan, we cannot hear you. Can you go back?
Okay.
Yeah, yes. Good
Go
now.
for
Thank you, Professor Liu and Professor Shen. My name is Ziyan. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about our recent work on contactless patient positioning. So the main motivation of our work is to better protect the medical professionals. So as we know, in US, thousands of medical professionals are infected with coronavirus during the COVID-19, and more than 26 died. And so one critical question we want to ask is how we can minimize their exposure to virus during medical scans. So as we know, CT and X-ray, these are the two main modalities used to diagnose COVID-19. And take CT as an scanning process. The technicians or radiology, they are heavily involved in the scanning workflow. So for example, the technician has to guide the patient to pose on the patient support. And then also, once the patient is in position, the technician has to determine the scanning parameters. For example, starting position and end position, and also the bed alignment based on the observation of the body shape and the pose of the patient. So there are lots of physical interactions and involved in this process. So that puts our technicians in a very risky position with exposure to the virus. And also due to the shortage of PPEs, the PPEs become very, very rare resource, and it has a very high demand. And so a side question we want to ask is how we can save the usage of PPEs during in hospital environments. So another question we're facing is the healthcare system is overwhelmed. So take China as an example. Each CT technician has to scan more than 100 patients daily. Yeah, and that's lots of scans. And how we can automate the scanning process and improve the throughput becomes very critical during the pandemic. Yeah. So one solution we propose to these questions is a automated patient positioning workflow. So the workflow we have in mind looks like this. So imagine we have a smart camera mounted on the ceiling of the scan room, which can take RGB or RGB plus depth multimodality data from the camera of the patient. And then based on the image data, we can detect the anatomical landmarks on the patient and estimate the pose of the patient. And at the same time, we can estimate the body shape of the patient. And based on all this information, we can convert this information into scanning parameters. And then the whole process become fully automated without any involvement of the technicians. And this is what this kind of system looks like in the real world. Yeah, so as you can see that the patient and the technician, they're in the separated room. The patient is in the scan room and the technician is in the control room, overseeing the scanning process and verifying the automated generated scanning parameters by the AI algorithm. So this essentially becomes a contactless patient positioning workflow, which will be very useful in the pandemic situation to reduce or minimize the contact or interaction between the patients and the technicians. So you may wonder what the smart camera looks like. It looks like this. So it's like a size of your hand. So we have 2D or 3D cameras, of course, and then also on the same smart camera we have it's a completely self-contained system with all the computation and communication modules. So which can generate on top of the RGB and depth images, it can also generate the 3D human model from the AI algorithm, including the anatomical landmarks and the body shape information. So you can just plug in this camera and connect it to the CT scanners, and it can start working and convert your conventional CT scanning workflow into a contactless workflow. This is the overview of the system. So as we mentioned, the system takes in multimodality data. Here we are not specifying because it can virtually work with, for example, RGB plus depth data or RGB plus thermal data. Yeah. And once we get the multimodality data, we can conduct the detection and the dynamic multimodal mesh inference to get the body shape and pose parameters of the patient, followed by a 3D mesh optimizer to fine-tune the parameters we obtain. And this is an illustration of the process. Yeah, so initially, after the regression, the model we recover from the patient may not be perfect. So it requires some fine tuning, and combining the detection results and the regress body shape of the patient, we can obtain optimized results. So it can fit, so the regress body shape data fits the detection results better. And based on the optimized 3D patient model, we can essentially convert this information into scanning parameters. Like I mentioned, the starting point and the end point of the scan, and also the isocenter alignment in order to get the optimal image qualities. And after this, of course, we also have to rely on the camera scanner calibration information to convert the image-based detection results into a actual 3D scan parameters for the technician to verify before triggering the scan. Once the technician verifies the automated generated scan parameters, this information will be converted into control signals to trigger the actual scan. So this way, we have the assurance from the technician, making sure that the scanning parameters generated by the algorithms are correct. So this is what the user interface looks like for the technician's verification. So as you can see, by modeling the patient body, we can generate based on the scanning protocol. In this case, the head scan. We can generate the scanning region of the CT scan, which is highlighted here in the semi-transparent blue bounding box. So the technician can essentially verify whether this is satisfactory, and he or she can make adjustments if necessary. But of course, since the camera is mounted on the ceiling of the scan room, sometimes it's a bit tricky because of the perspective distortion. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult for the technician to see whether the highlighted scanning region is actually covering the whole body part that the current scanning protocol is requiring. So usually in the traditional workflow, the technician is going to look from a side view of the patient, basically from a level kind of a viewpoint to look at the patient in order to make sure either the bed alignment or the scanning range is reasonable. But in this case, because the camera is mounted on the ceiling, due to the perspective distortion, it's difficult to do. So that's why based on the 3D data, 3D image data, we can essentially generate a synthetic side view of the original image. So it's not like we are adding another camera on the side, but basically based on the 3D or 2.5D data we obtain from the camera, we can synthesize a virtual viewpoint looking at the patient from the side view, so that it's easier for the technician to verify the actual scanning region and the bed alignment. So for example, in this case, the green lines are actually the detection result from the algorithm, but these two lines projection on the bed level is actually the white light. So from the side view, the technician can see that these two white lines are actually aligned with the region of interest, which is the chest area, based on the scanning protocol. And also, and this is the only way that we can visualize the bed alignment result, and also for the technician to make any necessary adjustment from the interface in the remote scanning setting. And now I'm gonna talk about a little more details on the 3D patient model recovery algorithm we developed. And this algorithm is based on a assumption of a parametric 3D human model, which is a skin multi-person linear model. Yeah. So with this model, we can effectively model human of different shape and 3D pose. And also from the model, we can derive a list of anatomical landmarks. And this is not essentially a limitation of this model, because we can always define new anatomical landmarks based on specific application needs from the mesh model, because we have the full 3D mesh model of the patient. And this is what the algorithm pipeline looks like. So we take in two modalities of data from the camera. And then we have a feature fusion module. So the use of a feature fusion module is basically because we want to make sure whatever we develop is flexible and generic enough to suit the need of the various kinds of application and scenarios. So we call this model robust dynamic fusion. So the robust dynamic fusion model enables the positioning model to be trained once with all the possible data modalities. For example, in this case, it can be RGB and depth, or it can be RGB and thermal. And then the model, once trained, can be used across different applications, which may have differing data requirements. For example, in some scenarios, you may not have the depth data available from your sensor. And in some scenarios, you may only have depth data available from the sensors. So for all these kinds of scenarios, this trained model can work at runtime without significant performance degradation. I'm going to talk about more details later on. And after the feature fusion, we are enforcing three kinds of constraints on the regressed patient model parameters. So the first of all is first constraint is we directly enforce the consistency between the regress patient model parameters with any available patient model parameters annotations we have. This can be the ground truth or can be kinds of pseudo annotations. And then we also, I mean, it's a low-hanging fruit to obtain 2D landmark annotations for the image data. So a straightforward constraint we can enforce here is the 2D landmark projection. So basically, once we obtain the 3D mesh model of the patient, we can project it into the image space and then compare with the 2D annotations we have, the skeletal 2D annotation of the human pose, as we can see here. But on top of that, so because we have depth data available as one of the input modalities, we can also enforce a higher level constraint, for example, 3D constraints. But most of the time, we probably don't have accurate 3D annotations for the data we have. And even if we have the 3D annotations, the 3D annotations may not be defined in the same work ordinate system across different data sets. So that's why we propose a new constraint that's called depth ranking consistency loss, which is combining the depth data we have and the 2D annotations of the human pose and convert it into a near 3D annotation. Basically, we look at the depth ranking of each individual anatomical landmarks in the image and enforce the same consistency constraint on the regressed patient model and the annotation we have. And this way, we can make sure the depth ambiguity can be alleviated during the training process. So we evaluated our pipeline on 4 data sets, so including 2 public data sets on RGBD in a general setting, that's PKU and CAD. And also we collected a large data set from a CT scenario, which we call scan RGBD and RGB data sets. And we also evaluated on a RGB plus thermal data set that's called SLP. And this is in also a clinical scenario, which with patients covered by different kinds of materials, thin blankets or thick blankets. So this is also a common scenario we may encounter in the scanning environment. A lot of the patients are covered by blankets during the scan. So this is some qualitative results on the scan RGBD dataset. As you can see that from the RGB and the depth data we obtained from the smart camera, we can precisely recover not just the 3D pose, but also the body shape of the patient. Even under some very challenging scenarios, for example, in this case, the patient's head is covered in the hood, and we can still reasonably precisely recovering the head position and pose of the patient. And here are more qualitative results. An interesting thing to see is that, like I mentioned, even if the model is trained with RGB and depth data at the same time, in the inference time, when one of the modality is missing, the model can still infer and generate reasonable results. As you can see here, when only RGB data is available, and only when only depth data is available, or when both RGB and depth data are both available. The results are, of course, when both of the modality are available, the results is best, but you can see the degradation is quite minor when one of the modalities is missing. And same applies to the thermal data, RGB plus thermal data. In this case, even when the patient is covered in blanket, we can precisely recover the pose of the patient under the cover. And here are some quantitative results on the 4 data sets we evaluated on. And we are comparing our performance to the state-of-the-art human mesh recovery algorithm that's called HMR. HMR was designed for general settings, human pose and mesh recovery. And as you can see that our proposed approach RDF outperform HMR in all kinds of settings, even when one of the modalities is missing. For example, here, the model is trained with RGB and thermal, and we evaluated the results when only RGB is available or thermal is available. And still the performance is very comparable to when both RGB and thermal are available for HMR. And in the case of CAD and PKU, even when one of the modalities is missing, the performance we can obtain with our algorithm outperforms HMR when RGB and depth are both available. So we also conducted an ablation study to show the efficacy of the depth ranking consistency and the feature fusion we propose, showing superior performance on all the data sets. So I mentioned that after the regress parameters are obtained, we also have the optimization module to iteratively fine-tune the recovered patient parameters. And so here we compare two different approaches. So one approach is based on a existing approach called Simplify. Simplify is basically taking the detection results and the regress patient parameters and iteratively trying to fit the regress 3D patient model parameters to the detection results, just so that the anatomical landmarks locations matches across the detection and the regress patient model parameters. So this is this has proven to be effective in fine-tuning the regress results of the patient model. However, it's a little bit time-consuming, as you can see that without using Simplify, using only the RDF we propose, we can achieve a frame rate of 66 FPS. But with the Simplify in the loop, the frame rate drops significantly to lower than 1 frames per second. So yeah, in order to improve this, we have proposed a RDF OPT optimization pipeline based on regression. So we are trying to use regression to approximate Simplify. Yeah. As you can see in this table, we have compared the RDF OPT results to the RDF with Simplify optimization in the loop. RDF OPT can obtain similar kinds of per joint error compared to Simplify. However, we don't have that much of a frame rate drop comparing to Simplify. So as you can see on the 4 data sets, we can maintain similar level of frame rate compared to RDF without any optimization module. So in the real world scenarios, the frame rate is very important because for CT and X-ray scan process, a real-time processing speed is preferred. Yeah. And also lastly, we also showed we also want to quantify the robustness of our algorithm to noise. So we vary the probability of a particular modality missing at the test time. So with probability P, basically the x-axis here, we replace each modality, each image of the modality with a 0 array. Basically, we black out a random modalities during the test time. And we can see that both HMR and our RDF model, the performance go down as the noise level increase, which is as expected. However, the degradation is much less for RDF compared to HMR. This is suggesting that the proposed RDF model has a better robustness with respect to noise. And this is demonstrating a very important practical aspect for a robust system deployment in the real world. And here are more qualitative results. And we have shown that the model works well with patients wearing masks, which is a very common scenario during the pandemic. And also we demonstrated the model also works in a general setting, in a more general setting. For example, X-ray scanning workflow, which demonstrating that the proposed model can also work, can be applicable in an X-ray scan scenario. And you may wonder how the system works in real world. So, so far, United Imaging has deployed successfully multiple systems in multiple locations, multiple hospitals in Wuhan and Shanghai in China. And so far, we are receiving very positive feedbacks from the technicians and the radiologists. And we hope that this kind of system can become more popular and can help to protect more technicians in the future. To summarize, we have designed and developed a contactless patient positioning system, and we described the design and development of the system components in enabling the remote scanning. And we have proposed a novel approach to recover the 3D patient model from a multimodal image data. And we have conducted extensive evaluation on several data sets in both general settings and clinical settings. And we also showed that how it can be applied to various applications during the COVID-19. So for more details, I invite you to check out our paper to appear in DMI. And thank you for your attention. That's my talk.
Okay, thanks a lot. So can you stop sharing the screen so
Sure.
then we can move on to the next talk. So I'm Guoyan Zheng from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. So it's my great honor to introduce the next speaker. So his talk is on AI augmentation of radiologist performance in distinguishing COVID-19 from pneumonias of other etiology on chest CT. It will be done by Harrison Bai from Department of Diagnostic Imaging, Rhode Island Hospital and Brown University. So Dr. Bai, please.
So good morning, everyone. I thank you, Dr. Liu and Dr. Shen for inviting me to this talk. So I'm Harrison Bai. I'm assistant professor of diagnostic imaging from Brown University. I'm a radiologist. So today I'm going to talk about AI augmentation of radiologist performance in distinguishing COVID-19 from other pneumonia on chest CT. So the objectives of my talk today is to demonstrate an example of how AI based on medical imaging can be used for diagnosis of COVID-19. I want to discuss the challenges, the limitations, and some future directions of our research. Also, I want to exchange ideas, elicit some feedback, and importantly, want to seek collaboration with people from other institutions and universities around the world. So in terms of study design, we basically designed this study to distinguish COVID-19 pneumonia from pneumonia of other etiologies. So we searched the institutional, the montage, use a montage search to identify patients with other pneumonia from 2 hospitals in the United States and also 1 hospital in China for our other pneumonia cohort. We excluded those patients with no chest CT scans. And then we manually reviewed the radiology reports and the images for part of our cohort to make sure that the imaging findings are consistent with pneumonia, and also for a portion of our cohort, we also have microbiology correlation from the respiratory pathogen test. And we ended up with 665 chest CT scans with findings suggestive of pneumonia. For our COVID-19 cohort, we identified by positive RT-PCR and also available CT from 1 hospital in the United States and 9 hospitals in Hunan province in China. We excluded patients with normal chest CT, and we identified a final cohort of 521 patients. So the total number of CT scans used for our AI study is 1,186. So this is our research design for the AI algorithm. So we first did automated long segmentations, and then after that we trained the deep neural network to identify those slices that contain pathology, with the gold standard being labeling by radiologists. And then we divided our final cohort into a training set, validation set, and test set in a standard ratio of 7:2:1 to build our COVID-19 classification neural network. We perform external testing by leave out data from 3 institutions, and then we also did what is called equal split, which is an equal splitting of the training and validation test set. And then we have 6 radiologists to evaluate our test set, and then we compare the performance between the AI and the radiologists. And finally, we wanted to see how the AI algorithm can help the radiologists in this specific task. So we asked the radiologists to evaluate the scans again with the probabilities provided by the AI algorithm. So this is the deep learning architecture we use. So we use what is called an efficient net, and basically we get slice level prediction from each patient, and then we use a 2-layer neural network to pull the predictions from each slice to get our patient level prediction. So for the data, we have 3. So for our training validation test set split, which I mentioned earlier, for the internal testing, we split it into in a 7:2:1 ratio, and external testing was done by leaving out 3 institutions, data from 3 institutions, and then finally we split the training validation test set into approximately equal sample size. So patient demographics, we compare the baseline characteristics between the COVID-19 and our non-COVID-19 pneumonia cohort, and there were definitely differences between these 2. As you can see here, the mean age, the non-COVID-19 pneumonia patients are much older, and also tend to have more comorbidities than the COVID-19 pneumonia cohort. We also look at the days of infection, look at the time between symptom onset and the chest CT, because as we all know, the appearance can be very different depending on when the chest CT was performed. And we can see here that there's a wide distribution on when the chest CT was done, and we basically took the first chest CT we could find for each patient, and for our AI performance, we achieved pretty good results for the internal testing, and then when we did external testing, we did see a slight like a decrease in performance from an accuracy of 96% to 87% on the external testing set. And then so we wanted to figure out whether is this due to the fact that there's some difficulty in generalization, or is because the way we split the data set, in like a 7:2:1 ratio. So we instead try to split our data set in approximately equally among the training and validation test. And we see that the performance is, for the equal split is somewhere in between the internal testing and external testing. So we think that, probably both factors affected the drop in performance on external testing. Then we compare the radiologist's performance with the AI performance, and we basically for each radiologist, and of course there is a variation in radiologist performance. Some radiologists performs better than others, and we compare the average performance and found that our AI algorithm is to perform better than radiologists. This is just a figure showing the ROC curve, comparing the AI algorithm with each of the radiology experts. So just to make sure that our AI algorithm is actually focusing on the disease area, so we did something called a gray cam, which is the visualization technique we chose, and basically we showed a couple of slices where representative slices where we showed that the AI algorithm is actually focusing on the disease area of the lung. And then we look at cases where most radiologists misclassified, and by most radiologists, we basically took 4 out of 6 as our number, and then so these are the 6 cases that we chose to display, and for the top 3 and the bottom, the first 2 on the bottom are the ones that the radiologists were wrong, but the AI algorithm was right. And for the last one on the bottom right, both the radiologists and the AI were wrong. And what we see here is basically some atypical findings that, for instance, for the ones that, for the COVID-19 that the radiologists got wrong is either, just a focal finding that can be mistaken for pneumonia, or it could be the one on the upper left where, it could be, looks like patchy edema or something. And similarly on the bottom, the non-COVID-19 that was misclassified as COVID-19, I mean, you can see that the appearance is not the typical that you would see for COVID-19. And lastly, we want to see if the AI can assist radiologists in performing this task. So we asked the radiologist, the same radiologist, to evaluate the scans again, given the probabilities from the AI algorithm, and so we calculated the difference in performance with AI assistance and without AI assistance, and we found that the AI algorithm was able to improve the radiologist's performance on average. And of course, there is a lot of variation in performance among the different radiologists. So some improved while others may not have improved. So there are a lot of challenges with our study. Basically, since we are getting scans from a lot of different hospitals in China and the United States, every place has different scanners, different scanning protocols, and that's a major challenge, is to how to minimize the effects of the different CT protocols. And also I mentioned about the differences in baseline characteristics between the COVID-19 and the non-COVID-19 pneumonia cohort, which could have introduced a bias in our algorithm, because the non-COVID-19 cohort is much older and also has more comorbidities and likely that can be reflected on the CT scan as well. So we look at also look at some different parameters just to see how things are different, and we look, one thing we look at is slice thickness. We found that for the internal testing where we split into 7:2:1, the slice thickness is pretty much the same among training validation tests, and same for the equal split where we split just into equal sample size. And but of course, you know, if we do external testing, then of course, you know, there's a difference in slice thickness due to the differences in among the institutions. So the way we try to solve this problem is basically use lung segmentation. We basically, because we don't want the algorithm to focus on anything else outside the lung, we also just normalize the CT to lung window, and those are the things we did. So there are many limitations of our study, and I'm just going to discuss a couple here. First of all, in general, you know, the diagnostic role of CT in COVID-19 is not very certain because especially in the United States, where it's definitely not considered the first line. And also our classifier only differentiates COVID-19 from other pneumonia. So one criticism could be that it doesn't really tell, you know, there could be other pathologies that imitate COVID-19 as well, other than other pneumonia. So so the application could be limited. So we don't have we have, like I mentioned earlier, we have the gold standard for a portion of our other pneumonia cohort using the respiratory pathogen test to show the viral species, but we do not have that for all of our patients, especially those coming from China. So we have to rely, so we don't really know the specific breakdown between bacterial versus viral pneumonia for those patients. And lastly is the timing of the CT is very important because the most important role of AI is probably to distinguishing between the two at an early stage when it's most difficult, or you know, maybe the sensitivity of the RT-PCR is not that high. So we wanted to do that as well, but it's the cohort size is very limited. So and there are a couple of technical limitations as well. One problem we found is, you know, the AI would learn the scan characteristics rather than the actual disease if we don't do something like the lung segmentation and, you know, normalizing our scans, and that's a major problem we try to solve. And also we use a 2D implementation, which supposedly could have been improved with 3D. Also, there are multiple steps in our pipeline, which including, you know, identifying the slice, you know, lung segmentation, which supposedly, you know, we could have eliminated and are working on to eliminate. And finally, our algorithm is, you know, considered, you know, a black box algorithm. So it would be better, you know, if we can improve the to demonstrate better how the algorithm works. So future directions, we want, these are the things we want to work on, and or are working on right now is disease segmentation predict the prognosis of the patients using CT and clinical data. We want to increase our sample size because with AI, this type of study, it's really the sample size is very, very important. And lastly, the real-time implementation. We want to implement our algorithm and test it in real time so that it can be used to help clinicians. So I want to thank the following people and my team and collaborators from both my institution and other institutions in China and the United States. All right.
Oh, thank you. Thank Dr. Bei for present his work actually accepted by Radiology Journal. Dr. Bei, can you just stop sharing? And then next talk will be presented by Dr. Ye from Korea. So he will mainly talking about the deep learning, as I mentioned before. In this case, he is going to use X-ray imaging, and he also going to develop a method for solving the small data issues in COVID-19 application. Dr. Ye, it's your turn.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for the kind introduction, and also thank you very much organizers for inviting me for this wonderful workshop. And this is actually this is based on our recent papers on TMI, the deep learning COVID-19 features on CXR using limited training data. This is a collaboration, joint work with my students, Eugene Oh and Sang-Jun Park. As you know that as of May 11th, 2020, there is already 4 million confirmed cases and also nearly 300,000 deaths. And so COVID-19 has been a very, we are suffering from the global pandemic of the COVID-19. In fact, there is no vaccines and also no treatment available. So only way to combat the disease and also flattening curve is early diagnosis. In fact, the golden standard for the early diagnosis, golden standard for the COVID-19 is based on the RT-PCR, reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction, because this is sensitivity is very high. However, the downside of that one is actually usually that in terms of time, it takes quite a while to get the result. Of course, latest development is now there is a very fast RT-PCR machines are currently available, but still, that's not widely used. And in that aspect, CT has also very good for the early diagnosis, because actually it has been reported the sensitivity is more than 90%. And also compared to RT-PCR, you can actually easily acquire the image and quickly diagnose it, for example, with the help of AIs as well. However, there are a lot of downsides for that. Of course, it's a more expensive system. And more important thing here is that because actually the routine use of the CT for the diagnosis has actually introduced some potential for the infection of the radiological suite. In most of the hospital in countries, usually the CT is used for other purposes as well, not only for the diagnosis of COVID-19. So after taking the pictures, you need to actually disinfect the radiological suite. It takes a while. So this is not a good way in most of the situations. In that sense, X-ray CT is a very promising direction because it's actually very quick and also it's very cheap compared to other CTs. However, the one downside of X-ray system is the sensitivity is low. However, but one good news is that the recent report that even in some cases whose initial RT-PCR was negative, but the CXL abnormalities are also obtained in about 9% of patients, which means there is some kinds of hopes we can actually utilize chest X-rays for the diagnosis purposes. In fact, because of that, a lot of people is actually utilizing the deep learning approaches to improve the sensitivity of chest X-ray imaging. For example, there are a lot of papers that are currently available, and we actually show some of the 3 representative papers. For example, one of the paper, COVID-19, is especially popular in the press, and other literatures, and also they have open source available. And they actually reported that 91% of sensitivity in classifying the normal versus non-COVID-19 pneumonia versus COVID-19 pneumonia. And other researchers are mainly focusing on the differentiating between normal and COVID cases. And they actually even reported higher sensitivity. However, the problem in most of the cases, because actually, for example, and especially in the first cases, that's actually the most reasonable situation you can think about in the clinical environment. Even in that cases, in non-COVID-19 pneumonia cases, there is also different kinds of pneumonias and mix them together. For example, the data set usually they actually use has actually both bacterial and viral pneumonia as a one class of non-COVID-19. And there are a lot of reports that actually viral pneumonia the radiological features are similar to the COVID-19 pneumonia cases, even for the experienced radiologists. So that means having this kind of categorization may not be practical in clinical environment. So in fact, actually, according to the study in 1998 in Lancet, so there are several types of pneumonia, and the common cause of pneumonia is actually, for example, bacterial pneumonia is the most common type. And depending on the geological reasons, then tuberculosis or TB is also quite a lot of portions as well. And compared to that one, viral pneumonia is relatively less common. So that means rather than categorizing with the viral pneumonia and bacterial pneumonia together, our goal is actually think about this kinds of potential triage. For example, if there is patients that coming in using the chest X-ray, we are interested in excluding the normal patient and bacterial pneumonias and TBs. And after that, because the viral pneumonia case is similar to the COVID-19, and using this pool, we are interested in utilizing RT-PCR or chest CT to actually have the final diagnosis of COVID-19. By doing this kinds of potential patient triages, you can actually save medical resources. For example, in many of the countries, the RT-PCR is now limiting resources, and also chest X-ray is also time consuming and also difficult to use. In order to do that, in order to use this kind of chest X-ray for the diagnostic purposes, there are several technical issues currently existing. The most of the important issue is actually limited training data. Actually, I noticed that there are a lot of questions about the patient data availabilities. In fact, this is actually the especially problem in this kind of global pandemic situation, because doctors are so busy dealing with this emergent situation. Because of that, they have no time to create this COVID-19 data set. So currently, only available COVID public data's domain, COVID-19 X-ray data is actually the collection of Cohen and Dar, and they actually collect the data from website as well as online publications. So this is actually some bias you can easily expect. And furthermore, many of the public domain pneumonia data set, which you can collect in the internet and all these resources, and many of them has an unbalanced age distribution, especially, for example, some of the data set have a children's coming from the Children's Medical Center. So because of that, it actually has some biases in data distribution. So because of that, if you actually remove these kinds of data biases, then you end up with a very small number of data sets currently available. For example, in our experiment, we only have a 500 data set, which can be used for the training and validation and test purposes. That can be actually obtained from the sources you can actually see in this table 2, which is currently available in the public domain. And so our goal is actually utilizing this kinds of small number of training data set to actually train the neural network. Of course, if the situation is getting better and the doctors have some time to create the data, then you have more and more data available. In that case, of course, neural network can be more and more accurate. But still, at this pandemic situation, we still want to deploy some neural network architecture to deal with this kind of situations as well. So in order to deal with this kind of problem, we actually start to investigate which kinds of biomarkers need to be addressed by using the neural network architectures. For example, in the chest X-ray, for example, in the standard biomarkers people often use in the computer-aided diagnosis, there are several kinds of features people often use. For example, lung morphology, or mean lung intensity, or standard deviation of lung intensities, or cardiothoracic ratio, which is actually ratio between the lung versus heart ratio, is quite often used in this kind of chest X-ray computed diagnosis application. But we actually investigate those things in the lung region, and we found that only standard deviation of lung intensity is a statistically significant biomarkers compared to other groups like a normal, TB, and bacterial pneumonia cases. So, however, this is actually very suitable for the radiological finding in COVID-19 cases, because there is a report that usually the common radiological features in COVID-19 is coming from the multifocal patchy consolidations or ground glass opacities that has been actually reviewed in the previous talks as well. And that means actually the intensity distribution in the lung area is not uniform. So because of that, there is some kinds of variations of intensity values, which means this kind of thing need to be taken care of. But however, you need to actually think about this kinds of behavior in this data distribution has data quite a significant overlap with each other. And that means this is not a correct, this is not a discriminating biomarkers to actually differentiate it COVID-19 versus other pneumonia cases. So and also this kinds of variation may be coming from the texture information instead of these kinds of patchy consolidations. So we also, to actually differentiate these kinds of compounding effect, we actually think about investigate two distributions. One is intra-patchy distribution, which means it's a standard deviation of each patch intensity histogram that actually presents a local texture information. And also another is inter-patchy distribution of the intensity. It's a mean intensity variation between each patches. Each patches is now taken from the lung area with this kind of random locations. And then based on that, this is actually calculated. And then you actually see the distribution of this kind of scattered distribution. You can clearly see that the intra-patchy distribution is not that much differentiating from other factors. But however, inter-patchy intensity distribution is quite significantly different from other scatter plot. This means that in fact, this kinds of biomarker is usually coming from the consolidation, patch-wise patch different distributions. So because of that, it's better, we concluded that it's better to design a neural network to deal with this kinds of different kinds of patch by patch intensity distributions. So how can you do that? So based on this kinds of observation of biomarkers, what it designed is this kinds of patch by patch classifiers. For example, this idea is following. So after lung area is segmented, now we are now having within the lung area, we are now taking the random number of the patches, 100 of patches, extracting them together, extracting the random location within this lung area. At the center of the patch is located in the lung area. And within this kind of mass, we actually using that one, putting the classifiers, and then based on that one, based on this one, you can do the majority voting. And from the majority voting, if actually the majority is classified as a COVID-19, we actually declare this is a COVID-19 cluster. If you actually do this kinds of patch by patch processing, those kinds of interpretability, like based on the salience map, need to be modified as well, because in the usually salience map people use, like a GradCam based salience map, is usually for the whole image cases. So we need to actually modify those kinds of things. For that, in this paper, we propose so-called probabilistic GradCam algorithm, and we'll talk about that algorithm later a little bit more in detail. Okay. So, and I'll talk about a little bit more in detail each step by step. The first step we need to actually think about is actually the data normalization. Because actually, as I mentioned, the source of data is from all different kinds of sources, from different public domain sources. Because of that, there is a very diverse heterogeneities of the data. So for example, this is actually the normal, this is actually the scatter distribution between the lung area and heart area from the normal patient data case. If you actually distribute that one in the scatter plot, there is a clear separation between this distribution and this lung distribution. However, if you actually do this kind of data set, which is collected from by Cohen et al. From the internet and also papers, in that case, there are this overlap, there are significant overlap between the heart and lung lesion in intensity values. That means the intensity is not actually biases depending on the sources. And this, if actually just directly design a neural network, even for the segmentation algorithm, with respect to this distribution, the result was not that good. So we need to actually do some kinds of data normalization such that at least for the area between the lung and heart area should be separated like this. So for example, this is an intensity histogram for the normal data, and this is an intensity histogram from the Cohen et al. Data set, which is collected from the internet. And from here, you can actually clearly see the differences in their distribution. What I did is actually to correct this one, we actually do the gamma correction and some histogram normalization. And after that, you can clearly see the histogram is following the similar normal distribution, as well as you can clearly see the intensity value is separated between the heart and lung lesions. And using this kind of data normalization first, and then you start to apply your segmentation algorithm and also classifier algorithms as well. For example, this is a segmentation result. Now you can actually see that some interesting behavior. For example, our only data set with the mask available is for the normal data set, which is currently available. So that means if you train your neural network for the segmentation algorithm for the normal data set, it really works very well for the normal data set, as you can see here. However, if you actually apply that segmentation algorithm for other disease classes, especially in the bacterial pneumonia classes, there are a lot of consolidation here. Because of that, the segmentation mask is not accurate, as you can see here. However, one of the interesting things that's actually the thing we want to exploit as well is this kind of this kind of morphology of segmentation is also can be utilized as a differentiating factor between normal and patient. In fact, we actually just used the binary mask, segmentation mask, and design a neural network to classify the normal versus disease classes. You can clearly see that accuracy is 87%, which is quite significantly accurate. So with this kinds of morphologies, we can clearly see the normal versus patient data. However, our goal is not just like a differentiating between normal and patient. We need to actually differentiate between multiple pneumonia classes. From that, we need to actually differentiate the viral and COVID cases as well. So that means you need to actually take care of, you need to actually take advantage of these kinds of advantages from the segmentation mask, as well as you need to actually design a classifier that is very suitable for this kind of mask as well. So for that, as I described, that we actually designed a patch by classifier with the majority votings as well. For example, when these kinds of patches, we actually trained the ResNet 18. This is a relatively small neural network size. I'll talk about the reason for that as well. And then for each random region, we actually classify in the 4 different classes. And then based on the majority of the classes, we actually declare whether this is a COVID-19 or normal or TB or bacterial pneumonia cases. Now, this is actually the classification result. What we compare here is actually global approach. Global approach means usually standard approach. People usually use image as it is and then put in all the new images to the neural network to train the neural network at one time. But because of the data is limited, and because we are now classifying 4 different classes, the accuracy of a global approach is not that good. 70% and specific is good, but still it's not good. But however, by using these kinds of proposed patch by patch approaches, you can clearly see that accuracy is significantly improved, and also all those kinds of recorrelate and all things is significantly improved. Furthermore, one of the nice advantages of this kind of, another nice advantage of using this kind of patch by patch training is it is actually more robust for the small data size as well. For example, here, this experiment, what it did is from the training data, we are now reducing the size of training data from 10%, 30%, or 50%, or 70%, or 100%. Now you can clearly see that the perform accuracy of the patch by patch and also global approaches decreases, but still the decrease of patch by patch approach is more graceful. Especially if you think about the relative performance by normalizing the starting point together, you can clearly see that global approaches are suddenly decreasing performance if we reduce the data size by half. But patch by patch approaches actually has a graceful performance degradation, as you can see in this picture. So why this kind of thing happen? As expected, because we don't have any, not that much enough data available. In this kind of situation, if we train using the standard global neural network approaches, this is a training curve for the accuracy as well as F1 numbers. Now you can clearly see that there is an overfitting behavior in this training curve. But however, if we do the patch by patch approach, patch-based approach as proposed in our method, you cannot see those kinds of overfitting behavior because now we have selecting the random patches. Each random patches works as a data, separate data, so it actually have an inherent data augmentation behavior. Because of that, you can actually reliably train your neural network without concerning about overfitting. Furthermore, we also compare our method with the current state of art SOTA method. For example, COVID-19 is actually one of the SOTA methods which is currently available in the public domain. But as I mentioned, it has a limitation because it actually merges the bacterial and viral pneumonia cases into one classes and just like differentiated between normal and pneumonia and COVID-19 cases. But even in these cases, we also trained our neural network using these kinds of categories as well to see the side-by-side comparison. Now, even in these cases, now you can see that the sensitivity of COVID-19 is about 80%, but our proposed method is actually increasing significantly, as you can see here. Furthermore, COVID-19 has a number of weight, trainable rate is 100 million cases. But however, in our neural network, because we are using the light neural network to actually deal with this kind of small data set, still with the same number of data set, with only 10% of weight, you can actually have a much more significant improvement, as you can see here. Now, the goal, of course, actually the goal of this AI is actually making the decision, but however, we also need to provide the interpretabilities for the radiologist as well. So how can I, that standard method to providing this interpretability is usually based on the salience map. One of the most widely used salience map is a gradient method. Gradient method is, can be utilized for various neural network architectures. This is a weighted combination of the feature map as specific layers. And this weighting factor can be actually calculated based on the gradient back propagations. However, so even though this is widely used in many of the cases, but however, it has been reported that if there is a multiple area which is actually suspicious, or which is actually it can be categorized in one region, sometimes Gradicam is only like a focus in one of the regions, as you can see in this picture. So the Gradicam map is very blurry usually, and it's not differentiating multiple localization as well. And furthermore, this Gradicam is actually for the training for the whole images. But as I mentioned, to actually save to deal with these kinds of biomarkers, and also to save to actually use, to utilize a small number of data set, our method is a patch by patch approaches. So that means this Gradicam algorithm need to be modified. But in fact, actually, there is a very natural modification of this Gradicam algorithm based on the what I call the probabilistic Gradicam. The idea is very simple. Each patches, you can calculate the Gradicam for each patches, salience map for each patches. But however, each patches has a probability whether that belong to COVID-19 classes or not. So now you are doing the probability weighted summation of this salience map across all the patches. Then, as you can see here, you can clearly see the high resolution salience map. We can clearly see the several suspicious region in the lung area very clearly in this kinds of probabilistic Gradicam, which has a much higher resolution, which is also gives a more detailed information compared to the standard method. And this is actually the application of probabilistic Gradicam we propose for different kinds of class data. For example, this if we apply the normal data for the using the COVID-19 probability saliences, you cannot see any kinds of things. There is some small suspicious reason, but because the probability is so low, this is not highlighted. And also bacterial cases, there is some of the consolidations here, but because the probability is low, you can actually see that this is not highlighted. However, in the COVID-19 cases, you can clearly see that remarkable salience maps as well as a detailed information of the reason which is suspicious, and also which is actually gives the interpretabilities in our decision making based on majority votings as well. In summary, so our goal is actually utilizing this AI for the patient triage using chest X-rays. Instead of actually just like differentiating COVID-19 from all the classes, our goal is actually from the chest X-ray data, we are now excluding the bacterial pneumonias and TB data. And now even among the viral and COVID-19 cases, which is even difficult for the experienced radiologists to differentiate between them, using this data, we just utilize RT-PCR or chest CT for the final diagnosis. By doing that, and you can actually significantly reduce medical resources, use of the medical resources. In order to do that, to deal with this kind of problem under the limited data, training data situation, we actually propose this patch by patch classifier design, as well as this kind of salience map, which has a more accurate, more like a localized salience information compared to the standard Gradicam approaches. With that, I'd like to conclude my talk. I'd like to thank all the doctors and nurses who's fighting with the COVID-19, and also this research is funded from our funding agencies, as you can see here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor. Yeah, great talk. Very impressive. Our next talk will be from Dr. Hayat Greenspan. She is from Israel. Yeah, can you exit the? Yeah, good. She will talk about the ESB special session on COVID-19. She and her colleagues organized, I think, in April, and she also talked about her recent research in Corona score. So, hey, it's yours.
Okay, just 1 second. There we go. 1 second.
Great. Can you share your screen? Oh, good.
Yes, yes, we're getting there. 1 second. Excuse me for 1 second. I see that we have this. Oh, okay, here we go. Like this. Let me make the screen larger. Okay. Are we good?
Good, great.
Great. Okay. I want to thank you, first of all, for this invitation to take part in this webinar. One second. One second. Great. Okay, so let me just start. My name is Kate Greenspan, and I'm head of a medical image processing lab. It's a deep learning lab at Tel Aviv University, and I'm also a co-founder and chief scientist of Redlogics. Redlogics is a small startup in the domain of tools for radiologists and incorporating those tools in the regular workflow of the radiologists. And in this work here on COVID, we are actually a joint effort of engineering from Redlogics, as well as several universities and medical centers. And I want to thank all my collaborators, and I'd like to share this particular work here. You also mentioned we had an ISB session. So in April, we had an ISB session that was on COVID as well. But let me now focus on this particular work that I showed a little bit of it there, and we'll show some here as well. So our story begins with a system of Redlogics that was deployed or is deployed in China, in fact, and this system is a cloud-based system, and you see the viewer on the left, the reporting part of the radiologist's workspace in the center, and on the right is actually the way that the AI tools are introduced to the radiologist. And this is one particular implementation that was done in China. And these tools that we support, as I mentioned, detect a variety of things in the different scans that the radiologist sees and report the findings with these key images that you see here and different measurements for each of these findings. So there is a chest CT package that contains several findings, including a nodule detector. And somewhere in late January, early February, we started to notice that the system was processing many more chest CT cases than we had seen before, and that our nodule detectors were detecting ground glass opacities a little bit larger than we were seeing before, and for different age groups of population and so on. So we immediately understood that there was something different going on. And this was then confirmed by our colleagues, the radiologists, that were starting to publish their understanding of the various findings of the COVID pandemic. And one of them here, early on, publications by Adam Bernheim from Mount Sinai, basically introduced the fact that a lot of these findings were manifested as ground glass opacities. Here we have a different publication that came out recently showing a subtle case of a patient, again, with very subtle ground glass opacities. And here, in this case, we see much more evident, somewhat diffused opacities. And since then, of course, the radiologists are looking for the various symptoms and categorizing stages of the disease and so on and so forth. So we saw that the tools we had, specifically the nodule detection tool, was able to find the smaller ground glass opacities, and we decided to see if we can quickly build additional tools to get all the ground glass appearances within the images. And the goal was to see, of course, if AI and imaging can support the diagnosis, the quantization of the disease, the tracking of the disease over time, and many of the things that were already presented here and discussed today. So, of course, some of the challenges in the field, again, well known to all of us, include the fact that we have very limited data. We have, of course, for that, we can do different techniques that we're familiar with, like director transfer techniques, augmentation techniques, and so on. It was also mentioned here before me that we have very limited expert time these days. So, of course, our experts are very busy. So we have to use our other techniques like learning from noisy labels or weak learning. And what we want to see is if we could come up with a solution that is robust enough, even though we have all of these challenges in our hands, in order to really make a difference, we have to be robust to the different populations worldwide. And some of the tricks we're looking at were developing something rapidly based on existing networks, existing technology. That technology can come from different modalities or from different tasks that we've done before. So really trying to push the limit on transferring and augmenting the data that we do have. The basic system solution that we are currently still working on is shown in the diagram here. The first, it's comprised of two paths. There's a 3D path in which we use the nodule detector that I mentioned before. It's a 3D system that has been working for several years. It's quite robust, and that we saw could handle the small, very small ground glass focal opacities. Then, in order to detect the larger opacities, we had to build an additional layer or additional network from scratch. So for that, we decided to go for 2D analysis. And I'll go more in depth into this path up here. So what we see here are several components of this 2D solution. First of all, we need to segment out the lung as a region of interest. And here, in order to do that, again, this is a consistent step in most of the work that we see here today. We are using a unit, but it's a pre-trained encoder unit. I'll show you in the next slide a sketch of this particular solution. This solution that uses a VGG16 encoder we introduced in MICI 2018. What you see here is an input image and output mask that we can extract automatically. And in that conference of MICI 2018, we showed that it performs very, very well as compared to many of the other varieties of networks that we can use on this challenge of anatomic structure segmentation that is a well-known challenge. So this unit that is pre-trained is our first component to extract in a very robust way the lungs and find the region of interest. Now, once we have that, we need to classify. And for that, we use the ResNet 50 network. It's also pre-trained. Sorry. And it's a basic 2D slice by slice decision, yes or no, classification of COVID or non-COVID. Okay, so for that, there are two things that we're using here that support the analysis in this very limited data scenario. One is we're doing this in 2D, so we have, it's not case by case, but it's all the slices. And we have weak annotations for these slices, so we only have yes or no per slice. But we notice that what we want to extract is the decision as well as a localization map. So for the localization, we actually use a multi-scale GradCom solution by fusing multiple scale activation maps. And with this solution that we're proposing here, we can achieve fine-grained segmentation. And we achieve this fine-grained segmentation using only slice-based annotations. So again, we have somewhat of a trick here that we can save on the annotations, save on our data, and extract very nice output segmentation maps, which you see here. For each slice, we have its corresponding fine-grained heat map. In terms of the classification, so for these 2D classification tasks, we have very high sensitivity and specificity. You see here 2 different operating points. So we are, it's a very robust classification solution. Now, 2D is just a way for us to proceed to the full 3D case. And what you're seeing here is a 3D case visualization, where in green, we have the solutions for the more focal opacities, the ones that we achieve from a long nodule detector. And then in red, you see the areas of opacity for larger diffuse cases. So we have this ability now to take a case and present this, this map in 3D. As was mentioned here in several of the talks, in many cases when the decision is to use the CT as a key tool in the understanding of the disease or the tracking of the patient, several time points are taken. And this leads us to suggest that we can use the quantification that comes with our automatic detection to monitor the patient over time. For this, we came up with a score. We call it a Corona score. It's a volumetric measurement of the opacity burden. Okay, so once we have the segmentation maps, we can extract from those for each slice where the activation is above a certain threshold. This threshold is defined with the use of experts. And then we basically can extract and define this measure. We can see it here, I believe. So we have, we sum up the activation, the positive detected slices, but only looking at the ones that their activation is above a predefined threshold, and get out a volumetric measure. That is the summation as defined here. Now with this measure, we can now basically quantify a status of a patient in a certain time point. We see here 3 different time points for a particular patient, and we have the scores on the top. We can also provide a relative score. So we will start with a 1 and then see the relative process of the disease for that patient. So what we see here are 18 different patients that we can now view in these plots. On the left, you see the Corona score for each patient over time. This can give us a relative severity of the extent of the disease per patient. So on top are the larger extent and larger, more severe situation of the lung volume. and versus the patients here on the bottom. So this gives us a relative understanding of the severity of the disease in terms of its extent. On the right, we see a plot that uses the normalized score. So every patient will start at 1, and then we can see how that patient, basically what the course of the disease is for that patient. In some cases, we see that the first few time points, situation deteriorates and becomes more severe. And only after a while, it starts decreasing and we can see recovery. And in other cases, we see a quicker trend toward recovery. So these kind of plots, we believe, and have received some feedback from different radiologists around the world, may have a potential to support the understanding of a certain patient cohort and basically also in the future enable us to predict the course of the disease per patient over time, and of course then help us support possible treatment options and so on, and management of patients in the hospital and so on and so forth. So some results using the Corona score. So we see a very an area under curve score of 0.9, almost 0.95 for actual detection of this disease for a cohort of more than 100 patients with confirmed COVID versus almost 100 non-COVID patient. And we can also try to start looking at our measure and compare it to radiologists' severity scoring. And here you see some of the population that is severe versus non-severe. And with our score, we see that we have a nice distinction here between the two groups with our measure, with the Corona measure. Similar kind of ideas we are now exploring or already developing for X-ray. So this was all for CT, but the same ideas we can do for X-ray. As people mentioned, there are areas in the world where X-ray is more is the more common imaging that will be used or is currently used for patient diagnosis and treatment support. So we are also developing, we have a lung segmentation for the X-ray. We're able to detect per X-ray very high rates of detection of COVID versus, or inflammation, COVID-like inflammation versus not. And we can see the ability to also come up with a score, which is the relative area score in this case, and again, track the performance or the process of the disease per patient over time. So let me start with some concluding thoughts. Our goal was to see if AI and imaging can support, and we believe, as we've seen in many of in the previous presentations, that we can in fact develop very strong tools. The interesting thing here is that we are all talking about a very short time period of a few months, and we were able to develop these tools very, very rapidly. And I think that shows the strength actually and the potential of using AI models. Today it's for COVID-19, and then as we learn how to use them, we can, of course, be able to do so even more robustly and better next time around when we need to explore something new. And I think this is one of the very exciting things that we see here. I think it's the first time we're actually learning together with the radiologists. So it's not something we're learning from the radiologists, but in fact, we're learning with them. We still have a major question, and that is, are we going to actually be able to affect the clinic? And can we really put this to use? And there are some places in the world, like China, where it seems to be the case where a lot of CT images is used, and therefore you would assume that we can definitely contribute there. I want to share with you another location that through this platform that Biologics has, we basically introduced the measure back into some clinics, and this is in Russia. This is Dr. Morozov in Moscow. His center is actually responsible for 120 different hospitals in the region, and they do use CTs, many CTs. And what you see on the screen here is Dr. Morozov looking at the case, as well as information that's coming from the AI tools. What he's seeing, or he can see, are these kind of representations of what I've shown you, what I showed here in our slides. And super interesting to see is the amount of cases that are now being processed using the AI tools. And we're talking about reaching a point of 5,000. We already had a day that had 5,000 CT scans that were basically passing through this center, and all of them being processed with the AI tools, providing the visualization and providing the measure, the quantitation. So there is a lot of potential. I think we still need to explore further and make our systems even more, more robust. We need to check with studies that we're currently conducting and are aiming to conduct even more the clinical relevance in various studies. Of course, very interesting thing is to combine the imaging with clinical parameters, and that is the way to go. And these are the kind of studies that we need to do. And I know we'll hear about in the next presentation. What I'm interested in is to start developing predictive models, again, to use all the imaging and the clinical to come up with some predictions and facilitate management of the disease. One thing that we also explored and we saw that we could do is basically explore the disease even in an unsupervised way. If we don't have the experts yet understanding all of the manifestations of the disease, we're basically able to take the cases that we see, and with clustering, we can see the non-COVID cases versus mild cases, the more severe cases, and basically a lot of tools that we can bring to the table, even in the exploration. And I'll stop here, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the great talk. So we will move on to the next speaker, which is Yang from New York. And he will talk about artificial intelligence for rapid identification of the coronavirus disease 2019.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you for an introduction, and then thank you for also for the opportunity to present our recent work and also learn from experts in the field. And then here's my disclosure. I have no financial disclosure, but I also want to disclose my research expertise is actually in MR imaging methodology instead of like machine learning part. So as we all know, the COVID-19 is a global pandemic, just as yesterday night. So if there are over 4 million cases, confirmed cases around the world, and then around 300,000 cases of death. And then the key thing I think to fight with this COVID-19 is how we can quickly identify which patient is positive, which patient is negative. So the current COVID-19 diagnosis is based on the virus test. So it's SARS-CoV-2. And the gold standard, as we all know, is based on the RT-PCR test. But we also know the RT-PCR, although they have very high sensitivity, which means if a positive, that means definitely positive maybe, but its false negative rate is also very high. So which means if a RT-PCR turns to be negative, you need multiple series tests to make sure it's real negative. And then another bottleneck for that is the current RT-PCR test takes some time to process. It's vary from several hours to up to several days. It depends on the processing procedure. And then we all know the testing capacity is still a limit for the shortage of the supplies, especially in the outbreak regions. Like New York City, we still lack the testing capacities. And a lot of researchers are doing a lot of fantastic work on this field, like using the imaging, like chest CT or X-ray, can really play a very critical role in this diagnosis. And luckily, from our Sinai team, from when this outbreak in China, so we can get some data from our collaboration hospitals, and then actually we published several papers in radiology in back to early February. I think one of the papers is actually maybe the first research paper in radiologists. So when we interaction with the radiologist, when they analyze the data, we did find some interesting clinical questions to answer for those. So first, they definitely, I just want to mention, like chest CT imaging actually is not a primary screening tool in US because the current is discouraged by the CDC. And then based on our radiologists typical findings, so we all know the ground glass opacities. So it's very, very unique or key feature for this COVID-19 positive cases. And then you can say that most of the time they have a bilateral, and no lung distributions, so rounded morphologies. And also there's some, aerospace consolidation, reticulation, and then crazy patterns, and then also reverse halo signs, the features. So, but we also know, so this imaging features is highly correlated with the duration of the infection. So in one of our paper published in radiology, we found, so although we see a lot of imaging features, but if you check carefully about the early days, early stages, in the first 7 days during the infection, actually over 56% of patients, they show very normal chest CTs, which make the imaging analysis very tough, or radiology very tough to understand whether this patient really is COVID positive or COVID negative. Now here are some cases I just want to share you guys. Say the left one is a 33-year-old woman with 2 days of fever, and then they have a clinical symptom like cough. But if you see the images, there's almost nowhere obvious imaging features. But the right one is a 57-year-old man with abdominal pain for 3 days. We can clearly see a lot of imaging features in the lower lung of that. Both of these cases positive. So if you give the left image to the radiologist, say is it positive or negative, they would definitely say it's maybe negative. And then this is another case about 58-year-old woman with 4 days, no fever, no symptoms, just feel tired. So from CT images, we can clearly see a lot of imaging features from that. So it's definitely from the RT-PCR positive. So what we really learned from these CT images, so we all definitely know the CT imaging have very unique features, which maybe can easily recognized by radiologists, but it's maybe for the mild or, not mild, moderate or severe stages. Normal CT actually in early stage is very common in early stage of COVID-19 patients. So it comes to the question is, how can we really battle this, using the very initial CT, maybe they only doing the first stage of the disease. So we all, based on the very previous several talks, we all know that AI is the role to find, have a great benefit to doing that. So some, learning feature from images. Also, we can transfer knowledge from the radiologist, deploy models, very instant to get results. But our goal is try to not only using the pure images, but also combine with the clinical information to make a more comprehensive diagnosis. So this is our overall framework for the AI. So just I mentioned, we have imaging data from the full CT scans and also some lung imaging information. For example, the blood test from the lab, and then also some clinical symptoms like fever, cough with sputum, etc. And also exposed history, whether you have contact with some positive patient or you recent travel history. And then we just developed for all of this data, we actually evaluate 3 kind of models. First is pure using images to see whether we can get some information from that. And then the second thing is pure based on the clinical information using machine learning models. And then third is combine them together to get a joint model. And then the data set actually we collect from our collaborator, hospital in China, back to early February. And then the total number is about 900, and then around 420 is positive, and then 486 is negative. But be very careful about this negative one. So just to mention, there's a lot of false negative. So our negative criteria is at least confirmed by multiple RT-PCR tests and clinical observation to make sure we try to rule out the false negative as much as we can. And then also the data we split to the standard training, tuning, and test it. But here we use the more data to test, like 30% data to test. And then the test set actually is also read by the 2 radiologists in our in Mount Sinai. So one is very senior radiologist with over 10 years reading experience. The other one is a junior fellow, which is kind of, you just mimic the very like reading experience to compare the performance with AI system. Here, the next I will explain more detail about the models. So I just mentioned our imaging model, like is based on the convolutional neural network models. So there are 2 major parts. The first part, we do the slide selection. So the reason we are doing that is we still like due to the computation power and also limited features. So we decide to, based on the full 3D slices, to select the key features. So this is based on our pre-trained like numerical turbulence models, which is based on Inception ResNet version 2. And then this model actually we use this from our previous data. And then that one can achieve very, very high accuracy to differentiate the normal slices from abnormal slices. So we just direct using this, and then for our slide selection part. And then for the diagnosis part, we using based on the slide selected the CT slices and then segment slices. We run the ResNet 18 and we use 18-layer residual network as a disease and diagnose CNN. So this this network actually takes the images from just mentioned input and output the probability of the COVID-19 the probabilities. I just want to mention that we're using the maximum pool layer, output the log probability as a last layer.
我在主持一个网上论坛。
Okay. So the rationale of the design is that because given the normal finding is usually localized in the sub-region of CT images, we would like to predict whether a small region is abnormal due to this, COVID-19. We might not see a huge region of the like abnormal regions. And then for the clinical information part we just mentioned, actually we test several models. We test like the SVM, random forest, multi-layer perception models. So we actually, based on some hyperparameter like optimization, we decide to use the MLP model for that. So the detailed structure is the 3 fully connected layers, which each layer has 64 units for those, and then predict the probability of the COVID-19 part. And then here's come to some result for our data. So just you mentioned, so this shows what kind of clinical information we get from that. Just I want to mention, because this data coming from multiple centers from different regions, and then we just try to find like the most common clinical information from all of the hospitals. So just like the standard like sex, age, the temperature to know whether it's a fever or not fever, and then exposed history, and then the clinical symptoms including the fever, cough with sputum, and the lab test findings we including the white blood cells and natural polysis, and then percentage of that, and then the lymphocytes. And then here's the AI model results. So just as we mentioned, we do actually 3 models. So you can see the joint model, the AUC curve is around 0.92. And then if you pure using the imaging model, this is about 0.86. And then if we only using the clinical information, is about 0.8. It's interesting. The senior radiologists, they can achieve the AUC around 0.84, but the junior fellow can only achieve 0.73. I want to highlight this part. This is because I just mentioned, for our data, we have another initial like CT scan with very normal CT. For example, there are 25 in the test set. There are 25 pure normal CT. Both the radiology cannot differentiate that. Say this also, they mentioned this is maybe the COVID negative parts. It's interesting, like using either the model can still detect some of them. Like joint model can actually detect 17 out of 25 patients. And then here's some more like detail about the sensitivity and the specificity. So I have to say our sensitivity and specificity is not that high compared to the recent reported in like published AI papers. And then we can only achieve maybe 84% of those. I think this performance maybe can also be improved by using more advanced technologies or models proposed by the previous speakers. And then here's some examples of the chest CT images. I just want to show you guys. So all of them is COVID positive cases. So for some cases, as you can mention, you can easily tell like B and C, there's some key features, image features, which like radiology can differentiate those. But also I just mentioned some of them, like for the panel A, you can see very normal ones, but based on our property maps, we still can get some reasonable prediction for those. And then this is some diagnostic performance comparison between AI and the human readers. So we report accuracy, positive predict values, and then negative predict values. So you can see actually interesting thing is the accuracy is very similar with our performance is very similar with the senior radiologists, but the positive predict values actually we are way lower than the senior radiologists. The good thing is we still have a reasonable higher negative predict values. So which means the model still need to be further improved. So in conclusion, so we just propose a generalized AI framework combining the imaging and then clinical data, to make a rapid and comprehensive diagnosis of COVID-19. And then our model can achieve similar performance of senior radiologists, and then combine the models actually have some advantage to diagnose even early stage COVID-19 patient with normal CTs. But due to the limited sample size and then clinical information in study, so further tests definitely needed to improve the model robustness. So in the end, I still want to share some, because this work is actually done in the early February, in the middle of February. So since the pandemic also operating in New York cities. So we actually, because our hospital is the one of the largest hospital in the New York hospital system. So we, a recent effort is try to build some COVID-19 registry, kind of like clean up the data, and also try to maybe clean and summarize the data to make it maybe available for more researchers to do that. So we try to collect all the clinical information and then images from clinical sites, and then massage the data to as a clean labels, and then put in the kind of like a cloud for different user to run their virtual machine to access those data. I just want to give you guys some quick imaging data summary. So just I mentioned, in the United States, the chest CT is not widely used. So if you see the images, the majority of the data is still coming from the chest arrays. So in our hospital, over like 29,000 like chest arrays. But chest CTs maybe over several thousands. And interestingly, also some of them MR studies, including multiple like organs. And then here's some more, detail about those. So this is the actual CT parts we can use. So we have like around, thousands levels of the positive and negative cases. And also some chest array and more data from chest array images. And then this is the MR part, because I'm doing MR related research. So I'm more interested in this part. So you can see we have different like organs like brain, abdomen, spine, different organs part, and both in positive and negative, and then PUI, which means we haven't decided in the system node which is positive and negative yet. And then the key thing I want to also mention is the clinical information. Just to mention in our previous work is we only use a small, very limited number of clinical information. But actually, we have more, comprehensive information from our hospital. So I just quickly summarize some of them. So you can see if the patient is in hospitalization, or you have more information from those, like ICU flags, some lab tests, including also maybe ECG tests, ECG logins, multiple lab tests and diagnosis, and even vitals, like the very key informations. So the question maybe for us is how really can combine this data as a big data, and then combine with imaging to make more comprehensive diagnosis. So finally, I want to just acknowledge our collaborators, all the co-authors, and then Here's some like the QR code for the preprint for our paper in Nature Medicine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the great talk. So let's move on to today's last talk, done by Xiaogang Wang from Huazhong University of Science and Technology from Wuhan. And he will talk about a weekly supervised framework for COVID-19 classification and lesion localization from ChatCity. This is also based on the paper accepted by TMI special issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for the organizers. So this is a joint work from Department of Radiology, Uni Hospital Host, and the Institute of AI of School of EIC in Host. So I'm the first author, Xingang Wang, and there are other authors, Xianbo Deng, Qing Fu, and Qiang Zhou. We contribute to the paper equally. And the corresponding author is the Chuansheng Zheng from Yulin Hospital. Okay, so let me first introduce the research background. So our research was performed in February 2010. So it is the peak outbreak period of COVID-19 in Wuhan. So this is a collaboration between the radiology department and our electronic information and communication school. So the background is we have very limited resources, including the limited allocation resources. So in that period, radiologists were exhausted in front line with many works. So and CT scans must be done for multiple times, and the data is very hard to allocate it. For example, the small GDO, and doctors may get tired. So this is limited allocation resources. And in other way, we have very limited computation resources because our lab in the university was closed, and we got only one GPU for training. So, but correctly detect COVID-19 is very important. So the goal of this research is to develop a high-performance AI tool for detecting COVID-19 from ChatCT in resources constrained settings. So this is our framework to simulate a prospective study. So we collected 499 CT scans, including 298 COVID positive cases and 201 negative cases before January 13. And there are 131 CT scans were used for testing after this time. So this is the framework of our study. So because we have very limited allocation resources, so we use unsupervised non-segmentation method to train a UNet to localize the non-regions. And we develop a very efficient 3D classification network, termed as decode network for efficient training and testing. And we also use the CAM class activation map method and some other unsupervised activation to localize the lesions. So so given the input, the city volumes and the city labels obtained from the PAC system, and we can do the non-segmentation and COVID-19 probability prediction and the lesion localization. Okay, I'll first briefly describe the unsupervised UNet training part. So this for each slice, the non-mask was for each CT scan, we use the 3D corrected component algorithm proposed in this TNLS paper, and we can get the long regions, 3D long regions, and then we can get the long region for each slice. But there are some bad long masks because we found that about 12% the long region are not so good, so we need to manually remove it from the training set, so we can use the preserve the long regions to train the UNet for non-prediction for each slice. Okay, so there are some manual work, but it's not so hard, so we can do it very quick. Okay, so this is our network we called DCOVNet, detection of COVID-19 network. So this is not off-shelf network for example, ResNet or Inception or Efficient Net. So this is a very small 3D network. We want to make it small because we want to perform fast training and fast training on one GPU. So this is the overall framework of the network. And this is the detail of the network structure. Let me see. Okay, this is the STEAM part. It is a very large 3D convolutional color, 5 times 7 times 7, and there are 2 residual blocks and 3D residual blocks, and the last part is a class file. We call it progressive class file. So the input of the 3D network is pretty small. It's 2 times T times 224 and 336. 2 means there is the city. This is the city image. This is the non-mask predicted by the unsupervised trend. We cannot say it is unsupervised trend. It's kind of self-supervised trend, UNet. Okay, so the input image is pretty small, and we use intensive data augmentation because we have many images, 2D images, but we only have close to 500 3D CT scans. So we need to perform 3D data augmentation extensively. So the 3D network is fully convolutional, and it takes advantage of visual collection in this part, and we also use dropout in the classifier part, because dropout can avoid overfitting and to avoid the problem of limited training data. Okay, so the interesting part is the progressive class file. You can see there are 3 pooling layers, 3D pooling layers. The first pooling layer we call this adaptive max pooling. So regardless of the number of slices, and we were put into it's kind of 16 slices. This is not slices. We can term it as 16 times steps. Okay, so for regardless of the shape of the 3D CT scan and the shape of the feature here is fixed. Okay, then we can use stratted max pooling. This is a very ordinary 3D max pooling, and then finally we can use global max pooling over the time, over height and width, and we get a small feature is 32 dimensions, and then we can use a class file to do 2-class prediction. So the network is trained from scratch, and there's no immediate pre-training. This is our solution for weakly supervised listen localization. Okay, so it contains 2 parts. The first part is the CAM activation. We use the original CAM, but it is in the 3D decode network. So maybe Grand CAM can get better results. Okay. And in this part, we found this the unsupervised 3D collected component method can have some activations for the COVID-19 nascent regions. We found for the listen regions, the variations is large. So we can use this kind of variations to combine with the CAM activations. Okay, here's the experimental results and some application studies. And our experiments were performed on a single NVIDIA Titan XP GPU, and it tests about 11 hours for training UNet and 9 hours for training the 3D DeCovNet. And the test is pretty fast. It tests about 1.8 second for UNet testing and only 1.13 second for the 3D DeCovNet. It's pretty fast. And the training, we use the ADAM optimizer with a fixed learning rate. Here's the accuracy and the positive prediction rate and the negative prediction rate. We can find using different threshold, and from 0.1 to 0.9 we got different accuracy, and from 0.2 to 0.5 our accuracy is higher than 0.9. And here's the positive prediction rate. I just heard from an audience that said PPV is more important, and if we use a very small threshold, PPV is good. Maybe in the current stage we use balanced training loss for this task. If we want to get more, if we want to get a better PPV, maybe we can use cost-sensitive training for this problem. Here's the results evaluated with precision PRROC and PRAUC and ROI-AUC. So our precision recall AUC is pretty high. It's 0.975. So it's higher than ROC AUC, and this is different from some previous work, previous talk. Some previous talk found that ROC AUC is larger. So we care more about ROC AUC. So in the ROC AUC curve, there's a sensitivity point. There's a point with sensitivity and specificity both higher than 0.9, sorry. Okay, so there are some ablation studies. So we have compared to 2D classification network. The 2D classification network is similar to the previous the networks in the previous talks. And for each slice, we use a 2D thin to extract feature, and then we use a global max pooling to get the feature for the whole city, and we produce probability. So we find our result using 3D networks more efficient and effective than 2D classification network. Here you see the parameter. This is much larger, and the computation cost terminates a flop. This flops is the computation cost. So this is much higher than this one. So it's more than 10 or 12 times higher than the 3D network. So 3D network is more efficient. And we can also see that using 3D network, the ROC AUC is even higher. And we can we have also do some ablation studies on the dropout part, and we can find that dropout can provide 3.5% ROC AUC gain. Okay, so we also studied the effect of our progressive classifier. If we do not use the convolutional progressive classifier, and if we replace with the fully collected classifier, and we can see the performance dropped a lot in terms of both parameter size and the ROC AUC. So actually, we find that the running time of the 3D the progressive classifier is much faster. We also compared to some non-deep learning method. For example, you use the gradient grayscale histogram, and we found the results not so good. It can combine with our RBF, SVM, linear SVM, and random forest, and the classification accuracy is much lower than 80%. And we also studied the effectiveness of using the non-segmentation, UNet non-segmentation, even if it's self-supervised, it's trained using unsupervised ground truth. And we can find that non-segmentation is essential to give about 8.5% ACC gain. And we also compare to the human expert, and our results very, very high. Okay, the radiologist is our second author, is Dr. Sambodeng, and he can get a very high accuracy, so is 97%. So, but it's very slow. It takes about 5 minutes to examine a CT scan. Okay, here's the result of the weakly supervised listen localization, and we tried CAM, and this method is norm grant. Norm grant is a very recent method in this VPR from Oxford University, and we compare CAM and norm grant and the unsupervised correlated component response. We find that combining with the unsupervised correlated component activation with CAM, we can get a hit rate close to 70%. So here's the definition of the hit rate, and for each scan, we just for each CT scan, we just predict one mask. And if the center of the if the center of the prediction is localized in a ground truth bounding box allotted by expert, it is a correct prediction. So this is, I think it is an okay result, but it requires further study. Okay, so here's the summary and the discussion of our research. So because we are because the COVID-19 is in the special period, and we need to have a very fast and efficient framework to develop a CTAI. So our framework is use very weak annotation. So we just need to export CTs and the medical report from the PACS system, and we do not need more many GPU, and we only one GPU. We do weakly supervised, or we can say kind of self-supervised non-segmentation, and we can use a very efficient 3D classification network, and we can use the weakly supervised listen localization algorithm, and finally we can get the COVID-19 a high performance COVID-19 cities AI. So because I'm from the computer science or deep learning side, I think weakly supervised learning is very essential in medical image analysis, because in many situations labels are very expensive, and currently the data sharing scheme for COVID-19 is not so popular. So I think if use our framework, we can just use this very weak label and use our code, and we can get a very powerful AI. So this is very good. And I think automatic machine learning is very promising in this domain because maybe we do not have many deep learning experts, but we can have an auto ML system to automatically turn the network structure and the parameters, and we can combine with super learning and auto ML together to develop high performance AI using this kind of raw data. And there are many limitations of our studies. For example, there's no cross-center validation, no other pneumonia, for example, community-acquired pneumonia cases for training. And our code is open source, and it is on GitHub, and you can scan this QR code to get the link. Okay, so this is the acknowledged part, and we are supported by NSFC, host COVID-19 Rapid Response Corps, and CSF Tencent Open Research Fund, and we thank reviewers for helpful comments, and many thanks for listening. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So that's today's last talk, and we like thank all the speakers and also panelists and also the attendee. So Dingang, do you want to say some words?
Yeah, I think we have 2 talks today, and every speaker actually give a very good talk, and also particularly most people actually they talk the work they already published in the journal. So I think quality for the talk is pretty good. And we look forward to 8 talks tomorrow. So the first talk will be presented by Kang Zhang. So he has a paper just recently accepted in Cell. And we also have 2 speakers, actually one from Cambridge, another one from Netherlands. They are going to talk about database and also sharing the data basically across all the research. I know, from a lot of people in the audience, they're asking for the public data set. So those 2 people, one from UK, one from Netherlands, they are going to talk about international collaboration and also building data sets. So we are looking forward to your attending tomorrow's talk, 8 talks, and we will start again same time, AM East time tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay, I will stop the meeting.
Okay.